I call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education for Tuesday, July 24th. Thank you. And we will begin by rising and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka, where are you?
Mr. Beckett.
The salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Muy buenas tardes. Si hay alguna persona aquí en el público que necesite los audífonos para interpretación en español, los tenemos disponibles por esas puertas dobles. Muchas gracias.
All right, we have headsets for the hearing impaired. They are available. And does anyone need a headset? All right. Moving forward, I have an announcement for closed session. Actually, for item 1 in closed session, there was no action. For item 2 in closed session, there was no action. Item 3, no action. Item 4, no action. And item 5, we did not take action. Moving forward, Superintendent's report. Mr. Matsuoka.
I have the pleasure of introducing a coordinator of safety, which is a new position in our district. And I'd like to welcome Kelly Moore to come up to the podium. And Kelly spent his retirement of, I don't know, a week or so, and then transitioned to this new job. Kelly has just finished a long career in law enforcement with Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department, and he was the commander.
Santa Barbara now, Mr.
Oh, that was my previous job.
Yeah.
It's pretty close, huh? Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department, and his last position was commander, and so tremendous responsibilities. He has lots of stories to tell from the last year of his employment, so we're excited to have him. He's going to bring a lens to our work around safety in our schools and communities. It's going to be tremendous. So welcome, Mr. Moore.
Thank you. I did, thanks to you, just put in my retirement papers for Santa Clara. You never know. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I am very blessed to be working here. Over the last week and a day, week and 2 days, the people I've met and worked with have a lot to give, and we just need to kind of focus it a little bit, and I think we're going to be doing very well together. As Mr. Matsuoka said, I spent 34 years in law enforcement with various agencies, mostly with the County of Santa Barbara. In the last 9.5 years was in emergency preparedness and response and management. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of that expertise and kind of get us going in the right path. So I look forward to it. If there's any questions, any need for contact, please do so, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. You may not like the answer, but you'll get an answer. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. And my own other comment, we do have one school that has opened. Santa Barbara Community Academy is our year-round school, and Dr. Ramirez and I paid them a visit. We were there for back to school night, and the turnout for back to school night was excellent. And this is midsummer, so bodes well for our school. And there are questions already about kindergarten and the future. And you know, I'm personally encouraged with what I see on the ground with Ms. Scharfeld as their new principal. So I look forward to conversations with the staff. Dr. Ramirez and I will be very engaged with them this year. So, and they are enduring some heat. I was glad today was not even close to what they predicted, which was good. So the board did get some info about a heat plan that we have in place for them. So that concludes my remarks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. And I think that's exciting news about Santa Barbara Community Academy. And so I look forward to learning more as you engage with the school more readily. Board comments, correspondence. Mr. Ishmael Paredes Ulloa. I've been on vacation. So I did it. All right, go for it.
I just want to echo Mr. Matsuoka's comments about going to the SBA open house. It was for back to school night. It was great to see all the parents. I was shocked by how many people I knew who were much younger than I was who have kids there. So it was kind of a flashback for me, a little surreal. But it was great. It was a little weird going to back to school night in July. But they looked like they were having a great time. The students were really engaging, and they had a lot of different good activities for the students to keep them entertained.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Moving forward, any public comments on non-agenda matters within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education? There are not. All right. Moving forward to D, A, acceptance of donations for July 24th.
Move to accept with gratitude.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. Moving forward to our consent agenda, and I'd like to know if there are any items our board members would like to pull at this time.
Staff would like to pull item E4.
Okay.
And can I ask the board's indulgence, a change in protocol that after we pull consent items, that we just go ahead and address them at this point in the meeting? Because sometimes I've had to keep staff here until the very end of the meeting, just in case. So I would like to change that process. So I see head nods.
I will just share that the reason why it used to be that it was always dealt with, but sometimes there are items that are just so lengthy. It kind of, we had it in the past where it was flexible. Like if it was something short and quick, we would take care of it immediately. And if it was something that was going to be really long, that was going to interrupt people waiting for the action agenda, then we would hold it to pass. So there's some flexibility in that way.
It was just at the Board of Supervisors meeting, they were discussing that very thing. And when they have their A agenda, they're just saying if someone wants to pull an item, they're saying, I don't need a separate vote, I just need a quick discussion on it. So that also lends the flow of the day as well.
Well, that makes sense, and it makes sense to actually say a quick question on something. So, do you have a quick question on E4?
Well, I would ask let's have the board, well, I could just address the comment and then we could approve it as part of the whole consent. So the board asked a question about, this was a new course for students who are receiving the literacy dyslexia supports. And was it going to impact their elective options? And at the time, we weren't exactly clear, so I went back and checked with staff. And it will impact their ability to access electives, because it's a 6-period day, and this is going to be a support class. And I'll add my commentary to that. I wish all our kids could have that access to the electives. We have junior high students, 7th and 8th graders, that have just fundamental issues with reading, with literacy, meaning they're just really struggling to read. So we feel that that's just a fundamental developmental need. And yes, it would be great if they could access the electives, but we feel like for these students, if we could equip them to be readers by the time they hit high school, that would be more important than some of their electives. So just wanted to be full disclosure with the board because you asked that question.
All right, so
With that, and I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody else has anything else, but I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously. All right, moving forward. I will now close. Let's see. Go ahead. Yeah, is that all right? I will now close the board meeting, the regular board meeting for a public hearing item, F1, for the proposed statutory school impact fee increase. During this public hearing, we will allow for 3 minutes, 6 if with translation. We will be listening to a presentation, Mr. Matsuoka, is that correct? Of our speaker, which happens to be Mr. Matsuoka, and any public comment that we might have, but not responding to them. So thank you, and Mr. Matsuoka.
So school districts have the right to levy what's called developer fees On residential, it's a certain rate, commercial, it's a much smaller rate. And these are, the maximums are set by, I forget which division it is in Sacramento, but every once in a while they take a look at inflation and they allow for the increase in developer fees. And so there's an opportunity for the public to comment about this fee increase. And we collect those fees through the city permit office. And so there's a spot where have you turned in your check for this project. And so we use those developer fees to take care of our facility needs. It is supposed to be tied to handling student needs and student growth. So it's a public opportunity to comment about these fees before the board raises them as part of this resolution.
And at this time, we don't have any public comment. So I will now close the public hearing, item G1, and we'll return to our regular meeting and the action agenda. We will now start with action agenda item 1, consideration of the Open Academic Charter School petition for the establishment of a charter school in the Santa Barbara Unified School District, Education Code 47605B. At this time, we'll take public comments, and I believe we have some.
Yes, so we have 4 speakers, and I'll just call you so you can line up. We have for first Jasper Rivers Allen, followed by Anthony Jackson.
Could we possibly change it for Anthony to go first and then Jasper, and Deborah would like to go last, if you don't mind. I was meant to put last on there, I apologize.
Okay,
Thank you.
we can work that out. So Anthony, if you will proceed, and then followed by Jasper, and then followed by Mary Ann Caston, and then Deborah Jackson.
Hello board, how are you doing today? Thank you for having me. We're really excited with our progress as a charter school and our outreach in the community. And it is our intention of Open Academic School Santa Barbara to implement a nature-based school for 21st century learners while serving at-risk youth, low-income families, special education, English language learners, and any child in Santa Barbara County who will benefit from our educational philosophy and environment. Our school design will flourish with community collaboration to implement programs and make families aware of this unique school of choice. Our hope is to be located on the 12-acre property owned by Santa Barbara Unified, the Hidden Valley property, currently not utilized. And our school will be able to set up portables before the end of August until the facility is built on the property, all funded by state and donations. According to the law, any property owned by the school district not utilized must be made available to charter schools. We are structured as an LLC and stated in our petition all profits will go towards student programs and facilities, which legally solidifies our commitment to the children and the longevity of the school. We urge you to approve the charter petition as a tuition-free model school of choice as requested by the community. I really appreciate that you all met with me and our team, and we really hope for your consideration today. Thank you.
Jasper, and followed by Mary Ann.
Hi, thank you members of the board for hearing from us. We really need this in the community. It's an important aspect of our community. We think when this original OAS was closed that it left a gap in our community, and we want to create a legacy school that takes the best elements of the open alternative school and adds a bit more academics and STEAM programs, takes it into the 21st century. And we want to structure it as an LLC so we can maintain that vision and continue that vision. And we are not going to take any profit. All of it's going to go back to the programs and the children. And charters are centered on child first programs. We think structuring this as a charter is the best way to go so we can maintain a school that will last for generations. We think this is really important for our community, for unique students in our community, for families to have this choice. It may not be the choice for everyone, but we think the choice should be there for the community. And we have secured a company that can give us the portable buildings at a reasonable rate, and they can set them up in a short amount of time. They said August 16th is the date they can have our school up and running for us. We just need your approval to make this happen. Also, as one of the members of the executive team, I'm speaking for everyone, we are doing this out of the goodness of our heart, and we are willing to reduce or suspend our salaries in order to get the school started. And at any point, because we have structured it as a LLC, we have the flexibility to reduce or suspend our salaries if it's necessary for the educational programs or for the benefit of the school in general. But we think this is really important for the community to keep this legacy going. It's an important pedagogy, and it's an environment where all students will thrive. I was a unique student, and I have succeeded, and there are many, many, many more success stories. And we really want you to seriously consider approving this. We have also sent you a letter from our attorneys saying that there's the school district's report does not actually have any reasons to deny this charter. Legally, there's
30 seconds.
no reasons to deny our petition. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. This is probably one of the most difficult moments of my career because I believe what Anthony said and I believe what Jasper said. I do think that this community needs a school that allows for children to construct identities and in a positive way. I've been supportive of this school or this attempt to recreate a progressive school. And I got to the point where I read the board response, the staff response this weekend, and I recognized that there was no way that we could respond adequately to that within the weekend. And I decided not to take a very fast action, so I pulled myself out of it. And by Monday, I determined, because of the response that was sent to the board, that had my name all over it, that I couldn't support this effort. I feel very sad about it, but at the same time, I don't think this is ready to go forward. And I would really urge the board to consider how to make a school in Santa Barbara that holds Gwen Phillips' dream, meets the needs of the children. We know that it's a legacy we know that there's a legacy in this town of 40 years worth of progressive education that deserves to be here. We need to have it. I would urge the board to move forward on some proposal, either, I don't know what the answer is right now. Right now, I don't think we're ready. I don't think this is ready to go forward. So I'm standing here with that. So.
Thank you. Deborah Jackson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to say that we have 130 students right now that want to go to OASSB. And once we are approved, we hope that there are groups in our community that were holding off because they didn't want the children or the parents to be disappointed if we were not approved for this year. So if we are approved tonight, we believe that we will probably have 300 children that want to go to this school, at minimum 200. There are a lot of waiting lists for a school of choice. And I know you've all read our petition and all of our supplemental documents. And as Jasper and Anthony have said, this is a school of choice that the community wants, that the community asked Anthony to start. That's how this all began. He got a petition signed of over 50 people, almost every person that was at the event that wanted us to do this. So we did, for the children. Because we know a school like this, how it can impact the community that we are targeting to help. So we hope and we pray that you approve this charter and that the school is able to move forward for the community, because we are very dedicated. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes this speech.
All right, Mr. Matsuoka, did you have comments regarding the district's approach to this charter petition?
I'll offer some comments about the instructional program, because that's my area of interest and core expertise. And I've been affiliated with lots of charter schools and organizations in really my last 10 years as a superintendent, most of it up in the other county, which I misrepresented Santa Clara County. I know the leaders of charter movements. I'm involved at the national level with innovative spaces. But this petition is so lacking in an instructional core plan. I'll just wait for these documents to go by. The work of our district, the work of really any school district in California, the transitions into Common Core state standards has been immense and intense. We have a brand new English language learner program that has been unveiled at the state level. We have a new LPAC. There's new science standards, next-gen science standards, and there's a social studies framework coming out very soon. When I read through this petition, I read through lots of activities, lots of noble efforts, but when it comes to the specificity of an instructional program, a master schedule, what kids are going to learn, there was hardly any material there. The version that I read, there was maybe a couple sentences about special education. And special ed is such a huge part of the operations of a school. So the instructional program is so lacking in this petition. My second broader concern, because I work with school boards so much, and the governance, supervision of anything, the lack of division of management and governance in their petition is unethical, I believe. I mean, how can the supervision of a management team be the same people? I mean, there has to be a division of the supervision of the management of an organization and the governance level. And there isn't that division. I mean, it's the same people. And then I respect Dr. Emilio Caston coming forward. I know that was hard for you to deliver, but I respect your being here and the statement that you made. I mean, you and I have had conversations about, what can be and should be. And so you have my commitment to work with you about, what do we bring to Santa Barbara. But for her to withdraw her support as the professional educator, that's a big deal. So I present those as some summary comments. There's lots of other narrative about the finances, facilities, the timing of all this. So I'll now turn it over to the board for discussion and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Matsuoka. So I will now turn to the board and ask if there are any comments. Ms. Parker.
I'll start off, and Dr. Casson, I do appreciate your comments and the letter that you sent to the board, and I appreciate you doing that, because when I had read the rebuttal to the district's findings, I was going to call you up here to ask if you were quitting Antioch, because that is the amount of, that's what you would have had to do to take this on, and essentially it would have been another administrative position that was not in the budget, and so there are so many things to talk about with this. I agree with everybody that there needs to be more options for progressive, constructivist education, the way it was envisioned by Gwen Phillips, the way we have at Santa Barbara Charter. There is more demand than there is capacity, and when that exists, we need to create a program for those parents. We absolutely have to. And I feel like this past year had so many challenges to it that unfortunately it's been delayed, but it needs to come forward. When this petition came forward and I took a look at it, and I do appreciate that we met and were able to talk through more than what I had just seen, and I understand your passionate intensity around this. But even just looking at the petition, where I had seen that you copied and pasted sections from other charter schools and didn't take the time to change the other charter schools' names. Where like, for example, in one of the rebuttals to the findings, the district had said, you know, you talked about CELT, which doesn't exist in California anymore. And you said, no, we talked about CELT and LPAC. But when I looked at the document, it said English Language Proficiency 4. And it didn't say anything else. It didn't, you know, California or LPAC. And so I understood why the district missed that because of the typo. But the whole document was riddled with that kind of thing. So what spoke to me there was that this was being rushed. That it was, you know, mistakes like that are understandable, but it was being rushed. And then when we met and spoke, and I asked some basic questions like, you're talking about starting a school in you know, less than 2 months, and you know, what sort of student information system would you use? And the response was, well, it would be we'd start off with maybe a sales database that you're familiar with, and then no, we would hire somebody who knew what kind of student information system we should put in place. And that raised lots of red flags for me. But one of the things that I had said was that you know, this was before I saw the district's findings, and that I knew that staff would have a lot more to say about it than I did in just an initial pass through. And certainly that was true. And you know, fundamentally, the academic program or lack thereof is my biggest concern. But there are so many others, and I want to raise a couple of them. And one is the location, and you talk about the fact that a portable company could put something up there by mid-August onto a property that has no potable water and no paved roads. I don't know who would get in trouble legally faster, the charter or the district, for our gross negligence in allowing students, young students, to come and attend school on a property that is not ADA compliant, that is not safe, and you honestly do not have a location that is feasible. And then I want to talk about this LLC, and both with what you talked about up there and calling it an LLC, but that you wouldn't put the profits to yourselves, that you'd put them back to students. I really want to be clear as we're talking about this with the public that this is a for-profit charter model. And it's very rare in California. I looked on the Charter Association website. There's only 6 individual charter schools, according to the California Charter School Association, that do this out of over 1,200 in the state. And it's very unpopular. It's unpopular with legislators in particular who are constantly trying to ban for-profit charter. It feels bad to taxpayers. There are lots of ways to get in trouble with all sorts of organizations, but for-profit in the public education world, you can find so many examples of issues coming up with that legally. It is not something I would ever be interested in seeing come to Santa Barbara Unified. I hope that with change in leadership that we are at the state level that we are able to ban them. But certainly it's not a board but as Mr. Matsuoka pointed out, it creates just inherent ethical challenges that without a really comprehensive policy just can get charter schools into a lot of trouble. And you know, one of the things in your finances, you were talking about how, oh, you know, we're going to raise $500,000 to get things through the first year. And I feel like any members of the public who understood that this was a for-profit charter, that it would be very difficult for you to get the kind of fundraising that you would like for this organization. So I'm very concerned that if you moved forward, things would fall apart. And I feel that, you know, one of the things that we said was that we always look at charter schools in context, that we know that we've had charter petitions come to us in the past, we will have charter petitions come to us in the future. And we have to hold them to the highest standard because these are our students and our families, and it's our taxpaying community. And this is just not one that I could support. I feel that we would be grossly negligent to approve this charter.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Anyone else? Mr. Paredes
I think Ms. Parker said everything. But honestly, from the conversation that we had, the readings that I did, I mean, just with the facilities piece, it just didn't feel like it was going to be feasible. I come from a program management background, and I know how hard it is to get tutors in the classroom, you know, running CalSUP for 5 years. Getting a school up and running between approval and August, end of August. I mean, that's, my fear is that we would get students signing up for it, but realistically, nothing would get started until probably October, November, if then, if we were able to get a location. You know, I'm really sad that it came with such a short turnaround. I think with, you know, if this had come to us for 2019, 2020, with a lot more lead time, a lot more development time, there would have been more support. There would have been like, oh yes, absolutely, let's move forward with this. You know, oh, you don't have anything yet? All right, well, you have time to go back and figure this out. I mean, just the facilities, the request itself was way overdue. So, you know, it's not feasible to get a space in Santa Barbara Unified. So, again, I agree with Marianne, I agree with Ms. Parker and Mr. Matsuoka. You know, I want to see something like OAS come back, but if we're going to do justice to the memory of OAS and what it was and what it's supposed to be, then I don't want an effort that is half-baked. It has to be something intentional. It has to be something good for our students. I would hate to approve, again, a half-baked application and come back in a year and have to shut it down again, or 2 years, because the students aren't learning, there's not enough people there who are qualified, we're not running any credentialed staff. Like, that to me would be a complete disaster, and it would just ruin the name of OAS. And that's not what I want. I want OAS to be something that stands for quality, that stands for our students really discovering themselves, their learning styles, and creating a future for themselves. And that's, again, some of the things I'm not seeing with this application, and it bumps me out, because again, when I heard that they were coming with something, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't wait to read it, because I really want to see something come up. Because OAS is not something that I took any pleasure in voting to close last year, like none whatsoever. It still, you know, it still hurts to think about. But if we're going to go back to the board, I mean, if we're going to go back and create something, it needs to be something good. We can't do half-baked. We can't do rush, you know, shoot from the hip, or else all you're doing is, again, failing Gwen Phillips, failing the students, failing community.
Thank you. Ms. Sims-Moe?
Thank you. I don't need to repeat what my colleagues have said and the other comments. In my basic understanding of charter schools and how they run, I felt really hesitant to move this forward in the fact that there was so much to be done, and could we get it done in September by that timeline that you were proposing? And secondly, it was a very difficult decision last year to make that decision to close the school. And as Mr. Ulio said, it's still to this day. So I was disappointed as well when it came, even in my basic understanding of what needs to go on, and I'm deepening my understanding as we're going through it. And I also want to appreciate your effort there, but it needs to be an effort that is going to be successful. And I absolutely feel that if we don't, you know, take a pause on this and look at this and go back to the board on that I feel that as a board member voting yes on this, I would be implicit in the future failing of this. We would be back here making a very difficult decision. So taking that into consideration, it's like we've got to take a pause here for the greater good of the students that need this and need this in this community. So at this point, I couldn't support this application going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Moe. So I will not be redundant. I do want to say a few words, and that is just that I support the comments made by my fellow colleagues of the board. I also want to say all of what you mentioned I agree to. I think just the fact that we got all this paperwork at the last second here, you know, we got a lot of stuff in the last 72 hours. That's not how you don't want to rush to start off something new. And I think that's a common thread. I do want to thank Dr. Emilio Caston. I think she was the standout actually on the application. I mean, it was because of her we had an educator. We had somebody that had administrative background, that was taught teachers. You know, she could lead a school, but then she was thrown in at the, you know, to do something she didn't even agree to. And I thought, well, how is that honest? How is that? That is just dishonest work. But essentially, the fact that there was only one person who had the ability to make decisions around the leadership of this LLC for-profit charter school was disturbing. So therefore, I do want to add one other thing, and that is that Ms. Parker had said, we did say, and it was very difficult to have to close down OAS. It was not anything, and we all still feel it. And we know and we care about the community. This has nothing to do about that we don't care and that we don't think that we don't need something like this. It's very important that we have a school that represents progressive, constructive ideas and education. I strongly believe that what we stated, and what I stated actually at the board meeting of the closure of OAS, was that we needed a task force, we needed to come together to redesign, we need a program, but this isn't the one, in my opinion, for all the reasons that we have stated. So I'm going to end with that comment and ask if there are any more comments to be made.
Did we respond to some of that information?
No, I'm sorry.
No, but I will move, I'm gonna get the wording on this right. Move to accept the recommendations of staff and the findings concerning the open academic charter school petition, and to not approve the petition at this time.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Moving forward to action agenda number 2, approval of change order number 1 for the San Marcos High School pool deck requirement project. Mr. Vizzolini.
Good evening. This action item is asking the board to approve a change order to replace electrical conduits in the concrete of the pool at San Marcos High School. Do we have any questions?
Do we have any questions, comments? Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
Batting 1,000 tonight. So, from my understanding, and maybe clarify for this, so the electrical wiring got damaged because the plans weren't accurate? Is that what happened?
That's correct. The electrical conduits are typically located underneath the concrete in the subgrade. They were in the concrete. They were not supposed to be. It was a future, it was a past project. I'm not sure what our inspectors were doing at that time, but that's what happened. So when they cut up the deck to do the demo, cut it out in pieces, all of that conduit got destroyed.
And we're doing what to make sure this never happens again?
We have a requirement in our specs now for as-built drawings that we check on regularly during construction to make sure that they're accurate.
Okay.
And we also have ways of tracing it today which are better than, it's part of the installation. I will say that as an additional bonus, the pool will now have LED lights as opposed to the old halogen lights that were in it, so there'll be an energy savings and a better quality of light too.
Can we make them different colors? No, that's all. Thank you.
Ms. Parker.
Thank you. And, it does highlight the fact that, especially during times when we have multiple projects going on, that it could be easy for a contractor to do something that's against specs that gets missed. And so I guess a larger picture question for me is how likely is it that that's going to happen with the current projects? That's kind of one. I mean, it sounds like there's going to be an eagle eye on San Marcos, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. And then just on this project, is there likely to be any other discovery items at this point? Or have we discovered everything behind the black curtain?
No, in fact, the concrete is poured back. They're now stripping off the forms and getting ready to put tile to finish, so they should be actually completing that project very soon. So we don't anticipate, if there are any change orders left, they will be very small in size. This will definitely not be the norm there. And as far as other projects go, we're certainly aware that we have to keep an eye on things. We have our second project manager starting in 2 weeks. That will be a big relief for our staff. And we are, diligent with our inspectors at this point and trying to get ahead of the game as far as locating with our own staff. We have locating equipment, so we try and do our best to get out there and find things that are there, but the reality is with the age of our district, there are things that were put in by past maintenance crews, for instance, that didn't get put on a plan anywhere. Not that the pool lights were that case, but.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say that I agree with Ms. Parker and Mr. Paredes-Ulloa in that we would really be wanting you to focus and make sure, and not to say, but just an effort that this wouldn't happen again. Because when I was looking at it, I'm like, this is an expensive change order. And so just, I guess being aware of making sure that a mistake like this doesn't happen so we don't have something like this in the future. Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes unanimously.
May I
Yes.
offer a comment about change orders, just as a concept? So we build in a 10% contingency fee. Anybody who's done a remodel personally at your house knows that there are things that you discover once you open up anything. My monitoring is, are we staying within the 10% contingency fee structure that we've designed into the whole bond program? And so, I was looking up the original cost of this project. It was $853,000. Remember, we downsized every project by 10% because we were trying to get our budget in. And so we downsized the budget to $772,000. The change order as a percentage, it's actually very reasonable. I mean, we work with that 10% number. And by the way, when this next wave of projects comes in, we're going to deliver sort of an update to the board about how are we doing with the flow of projects. Are we staying in the total budget space? Because the contingency budget, if we don't use it, that goes to program reserve. And then by the way, our program management of this, because it's in-house, I mean, we could be saving 8% of these projects because we're running all of this on, with our team. So we're about 6 months out from getting sort of a clump of projects through. And we look forward to giving you an update on the flow of work and budgets and progress. This will not be the last change order. I just know that's the reality of construction. But just know that there is built into every project 10% contingency. Okay.
Thank you. And actually, I was going to ask when we might be getting that Excel sheet. Actually, I was going to maybe address it more on the next item, but the fact that you brought that up, I'm looking forward to seeing that because I think that was very helpful to see where we are, where we stand, where we are with our Measure I funds. So I will look forward to see where we are in that respect. So moving forward, we will look at approval of proposal for Pacific Materials Laboratory for additional testing and observation for the Santa Barbara High School Peabody Grandstand Replacement, Stadium Renovation, and Site Utilities Upgrade Project. Mr. Vizzolini.
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately, to be honest, this was an oversight with the planning department. The original proposal from Pacific Materials Lab, as it turned out, was only to do testing for the actual grandstands themselves. And as you're aware, the scope of this project got huge with the storm drain and the retaining walls and the amount of testing that's required by DSA with our inspector that's there full time is large, as you can see. So this is projected out to the end of the project, so we don't foresee seeing any more charges for this. And it does fall within our soft cost budget. We still have some budget space there when we're done.
Board, any comments, questions? Ms. Parker?
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I understand, and I'm looking at the soft costs, and I know where everybody's going in terms of seeing how this is playing out. Is this project still on time for April completion?
I don't think it's gonna be quite completed, but I think it will be ready for graduation.
Okay, June. Okay. So I'm looking at the remaining soft cost budget space, and of course with the amount that we've already run through for the soft costs, it's concerning, especially with this large amount. And I know that you can't see the future, Mr. Vizzolini. But I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about what's going on with the soft costs with the stadium and what concerns we should be having.
I think that actually aside from this, there's one other issue on the horizon, and that is that inspectors, DSA qualified inspectors in the state of California are scarce. We got some bad news that our current inspector is leaving. So we've already gone through the process of finding a qualified inspector. DSA has approved them. We're actually meeting with that person next week, so we haven't lost our current inspector. But the rates for new inspectors has gone up. So for future projects, our cost went from $65 an hour to $95 an hour, for instance. So that's something that it's a known that we don't have any control of. We're required to have those inspectors on our jobs, and you know, we were reaching out to many companies, but we've got one company where even the owner is, you know, planning on possibly doing some inspection for us, and that's something he hasn't done in quite a while. So we are very aware of the soft costs. Other than that, I think we're doing very well. We haven't had, you know, our change order contingency at Peabody Stadium is actually very, very low. So we're in good shape there. So our budget at the stadium itself is doing well.
That contingency order, I'll remind the board, you wouldn't remember this, we reduced it from 10%, which is our hope, down to 5%, because that just was a big budget. And as Mr. Vizzolini said, we've hardly tapped that 5%, and that's not on the spreadsheet. So you know, as I watch Peabody, I mean, I get the weekly reports. With that one glitch, this project has moved along very nicely. I'm confident that we're going to have graduation in June 2019. So it's looking good.
I just had a comment.
Ms. Sims-Martin?
Thank you. Just in terms of some of the feedback we've gotten around the community, around the noise and that, so can you address that, please?
Actually, I can. We had Ms. Jate and I had an unfortunate visit with a neighbor who was very upset about noise and trucks idling outside their house and, you know, backup. As it turns out, it was the city of Santa Barbara. I did a little investigating, and Lundgren Management, who is this is the one project where we have a construction management firm helping us, actually got out there, and at 5:45 in the morning, the city was working on Anapamoo Street. So I reached out to one of my colleagues at the city, and he said, "We're very sorry, we shouldn't be starting that early, I'll take care of it."
Have you circled back to
Yes.
the neighbor?
We've tried. The person left us an email that doesn't work. It comes back with an error. We have reached out, we put messaging on their house because we couldn't get a hold of them, but we're very aware, and Lundgren Management and AMG have both reached out to all the neighbors. And it's in the minutes every Tuesday. This morning it was in the minutes again. We have to message out if we're doing any type of Saturdays. We can't start before 7, and they're very diligent about that.
Well, thank you. Just following up on that, I'm concerned that while we had one neighbor specifically complain, that there are many neighbors who think it's us when it was the city. And so I'm wondering if this is a communications piece that needs to go out to all to think about how this has been framed, that again, just a reminder that if you hear something before this hour, it could be a different construction project that's going on, and that you may want to reach out to the city, and not just, I don't want to like point fingers at the city, but I also don't want there to be negative feelings around it, even if they haven't expressed it to us, because there's a lot of times that's going on.
I'll give direction to our team, and we'll get that message out that we won't throw anybody under the bus, so to speak, but we will message out that if you have a complaint, please go outside and see who it is, and the appropriate response is to call the city about the noise ordinance and let them come deal with it. And if it's our people, then there will be circumstances for them to answer to.
Thank you, Mr. Paredes. Figueroa.
Last thing on that one piece, I too am a neighbor of Peabody Stadium, and again, maybe I'm spoiled because my dad was a construction worker, and I've actually had construction happen like 10 feet away from my house growing up. But the project at Peabody has been ridiculously quiet. Every now and again, I hear one of the trucks, beep when they're backing up. But I actually imagined a much worse situation on my street because I'm, again, literally right around the corner, right behind Peabody Stadium, and it's been fantastic. I've not been bothered by it one bit, and my windows are always open. So
Yeah, we really have not gotten in very many complaints at all. So they're either being quiet about it or they're not, I haven't heard about them.
Well, I appreciate that. Did you want to have one more comment?
No, I was just gonna vote, make a motion.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll move that we approve the proposal for Pacific Materials Laboratory for additional testing and observation for the Santa Barbara High School Peabody Grandstand replacement, stadium renovation, and site utilities upgrade project.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving to number 4, recommendation for adoption of resolution 2018/2019-03, adopting development fees on residential and commercial and industrial development to fund construction and reconstruction of school facilities. I see that Mr. Tay is not here this evening, and Mr. Vissolini gets to have the opportunity again.
That's correct. Yeah, so this is just approval of the actual resolution that Mr. Matsuoka discussed earlier, and we're asking the board to approve.
A motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It passes unanimously.
Thank
You
very
can
much.
sit down, I think. Thank you. All right, moving to number 5, approval of new classified management job description, food service operations manager, Dr. Vecchio.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, board members. So tonight I'm bringing forward a proposal for a job description for a classified management position. Currently, the director of food services, Nancy Weiss, oversees roughly 100 employees on different campuses. And with the expansion of the food services program into catering and mobile cafe, we've found a need to have a management position, classified management position that can help assist her with that oversight. And so you have the job description, and we're recommending that you approve that job description.
Board, any comments? Mr. Paredes, are you over?
Dr. Vecchio, is it just one position that we're filling, or will this be for multiples?
No, it would just be for one.
And so they'll be splitting the management of those 100 between them?
That's correct. There's some supervising, training, management.
Any other questions, comments? All right, do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously, thank you. Moving forward to item number 6, approval of classified job description, playground supervisor.
All right, this job description really comes out of Assembly Bill 670, which requires us to, we had noon supervisors at the elementary campuses, and it really requires those positions to not be hourly anymore, but to actually become part of the classified bargaining unit. And so that has necessitated us to create a job description for that position, which is a playground supervisor. And so we're recommending that that job description be approved.
Yes, Ms. Parker.
So just to be clear, there's no change in pay level, there's no change in like the hours that they might work. It's just essentially being codified into a job description in a way that wasn't in the past. Is that correct?
No, there will be a change in pay because they become classified bargaining unit members, and so they will be a difference in pay.
There's a difference in pay. Do you know how much of a difference there is in pay? Like what it was before and what it would be now? Because it says that there's no fiscal impact, but it sounds like that there will be at least something of a fiscal impact.
Just let me look at this just real quick, 1 second.
While he's looking it up, I'll give my 2 cents, because I was running HR when this came up, and so we did a cost analysis, how much are we currently spending? I think the total expenditure across our 9 elementaries was about $375,000, and it was mostly site-based funds. Our costs are going to go up because this is going to be a position that's going to sort of anchor the supervision of an elementary school. We still have to backfill with some part-time positions of this type because, elementary schools just have a lot of areas to cover. So our costs are going to go up. We don't have an analysis yet. We need to get this position as the foundations of this new model. Part of the cost that's going to go up is now we have PERS pension costs. And we actually talk about if we get these positions to 30 hours, then they get health insurance. I'm of the mind that we should help our local employees have health insurance. So we need to put together a full budget. Our first is to get this job description built. I would say our costs are going to go up 25 to 30% above that estimate of 375,000. So it's a ballpark.
So this, just to clarify, this position actually is there'll be a lot of 2, maybe 3-hour employees that would take on this position. The one that actually anchors is the next item on the agenda, which is the campus safety assistant. And I was not able to find actually the analysis of the total current cost that we have and what it'll be after, but it will be higher.
Well, I wouldn't mind I don't have a problem with approving the job description at all. I would appreciate at some point in the future just learning more about what the impact is going to be on the budget. And I did have one other quick question, and that is on the education, training, and experience, where it says any combination of education and experience that meet the requirements of the position. That's obviously very vague, and I'm wondering how deliberate that is. I mean, do we need to give sites a lot of leeway for that? Is that why it is as vague as it is? Because I haven't seen that many that fall into this, any combination of education experience.
I believe we do need to give the sites quite a bit of leeway with this position.
Looking at Ms. Lockridge as personal experience. I mean, you have filled this with parents who are willing to work, just with some really short term, so they need a lot of flexibility. Yeah.
So I just had a couple of comments. One is, I agree that this is something we have to do as a job description based on what you've told us. I don't feel comfortable agreeing to a financial increase until I know what that is, especially in light of the topic that we are going to be hearing in our report section about our PE instructors. So I'd like to know, it's important that we know what it is we're spending and why and how much more we're spending, because we are at a situation where we're not spending a certain amount of money for our PE instructors. So I'm looking forward to that report and that discussion, but I just feel like it needs to be stated that. The second thing I wanted to bring up was that the importance, and I know in my own experience as a teacher, that there is some sort of, that they're going to be now in this new positionality and term of classification, that they also are going to be going through some restorative justice training, because that is where a lot of the problems happen in elementary school, is in the recess and in the playground. So I would hope, and one of the challenges I know as teachers, that you always have to stop everything and deal with an issue right after recess. And so one of the challenges I know, and it just continues to happen, is that the training isn't there for these supervisors. So I would really insist that some type of training around restorative practices, peer mediation, maybe in student conflict resolution, whatever, but that there is a consistent, sustainable approach with regards to the playground supervisor. Any other comments? All right, so we are just actually approving the job description. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moving on to number 7, approval of classified job description, campus safety, assistant elementary.
All right, so what we did, this goes along with the assembly bill that I mentioned previously, and what we did is we created an opportunity to really take a look at the supervision on elementary campuses, and so this is a position that would provide us mostly a 6-hour position on a campus, very similar to what we find on the junior high and high school campuses, but at each elementary site. That would be able to, like Mr. Matsuoka said, anchor the really campus safety and supervision. And then we would also fill positions that are the playground supervisor position, of which the job description you just approved. So that's what this position is. You'll notice on here the annual cost and salary is noted as $23,750, with 9 positions being filled. That would be an estimated cost of $213,000 roughly.
Ms. Parker.
I think I know that probably all of the elementary principals would really appreciate this position. I know that it's needed. And I feel like in this day and age that this is not security, this is safety, but safety is our core mission here, frankly. And there's so much that we could be doing at the elementary level that just gets glossed over and not dealt with immediately in ways that Dr. Reed has mentioned, because we don't have somebody that has the time and the direct responsibility in this way to take care of it. So I appreciate that, but also piggybacking on what Dr. Reed said, this would cost $213,000. And especially given that there is a finite amount of money in this district and everything is a trade-off. And we will be talking about PE at Monroe, for example, or PE at our elementary schools in general, on item H4. And so I'm very aware that this is just everything that we've done, or most everything that we've done tonight is a trade-off, right? But this is just so clearly explicit because it is also elementary and it's going to be coming straight out of what happens on our elementary school campuses. And so I'm aware of that. And again, I think it's important to approve the job description tonight. I do think that it's important to think about this in context, and I would love to get feedback from elementary principals about where the most, what is the most beneficial use of funds. And so I would appreciate if when we get going a little further, when management is back, that this is a conversation with the elementary principals. I'm sure you've already had this discussion, but to have it in a way that the board can hear about it in terms of trade-offs. I think it's really important for us for us all to be able to talk about to the community, to parents, about why it is that we're spending money here and not there. And so I really feel it's important that our site administrators take a lead on that and help us understand that. And then in terms of the job description itself, I did not see anything with it. Again, I'll note that there's a lot of flexibility in the education, training, and experience, although a little bit more narrow this time. And I appreciate all that Dr. Reed had to say about training and professional development for this. I mean, I know that there are expectations around it. I will note that the previous, for the playground position, the playground supervisor position, it explicitly called out using the techniques and protocols that the district uses. But this particular one, I didn't see that. And it seems to me that this person needs to be at a level above the playground supervisor in terms of their understanding and knowledge of, for example, restorative approaches. And that maybe that's something that we should add in to this job description.
Ms. Sims Moon?
I just had a question on the additional requirements for this position versus the one before that, particularly about the first aid, having a certificate. Would we want that for the playground supervisor as well?
You know, I'm not sure how they were operating in the past, you know, Dr. Ramirez.
I'm sorry, can you reframe the question?
Yes, on the campus safety assistant, the description on additional requirements, if you can go to that, Brian. We were asking for additional requirements of first aid and CPR and bilingual ability. We don't have that on the playground supervisor, and I was just wondering, was that an oversight or why?
I wouldn't be able to represent whether that was an oversight or not, but it would be helpful to, as the job description indicates, add that bilingual is preferred in order to bring it into alignment.
It does. The previous one did say bilingual is preferred. It just didn't have the first aid and CPR piece.
Right, that's the specific piece. And so, and that also, the position is eligible for interpreting, translation, premium pay. So
That is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Our classified unit members are eligible for, that is a negotiated item, and are eligible for a bilingual pay differential. And that was negotiated, it's been in existence for quite some time, and it was negotiated, I want to say approximately 2 years ago, and then it was revisited during this last round of negotiations. But it is, it's our opportunity and attempt to reach out to a broader base of our workforce.
I just didn't see that in the previous job description that you're bringing, so I was just trying to make sure they aligned in that way. So I didn't see this additional requirements in the playground supervisor. So we can look at that.
I think the difference in terms of where there are differences is I want you to envision the first job description. These are like sometimes a 1 hour a day person, a 2 hour a day max, and then we have 5 of them just to cover an elementary campus. So I think if we were to say, okay, each one, 2 hour person, we have to get them CPR, first aid trained. I feel like that's putting a burden on just the system that is just not appropriate. Whereas this position is going to be probably a 6 hour position, and they should have all those trainings and bilingual stipend opportunities. So that's really the way to think about this. This is going to be the anchor position, and then the first one are honestly covering the lunch periods, just filling in with gaps.
But I would say to that, and I agree with that, and I understand and appreciate that, but at least you have the basic first aid if someone gets hurt, even if it's, how to deal with it at that moment and not have to go to someone else in terms of that. At least have that basic first aid training.
Great. We can also do a basic first aid with the employees that we hire. Yeah. And I wanted to also speak to the finance of this. If a site has currently 20 hours of services, supervision services, so having a campus safety person for 6 hours, that's going to be part of that. What used to exist as 20 hours, so they're going to hire most likely right around 14 hours of the noon supervision. So the increase, most of the increase will be because it's a classified employee now and the benefits associated with that.
Ms. Parker?
So just on this particular job description, and I know that this is worked out and negotiated with CSEA, but I would ask if it would be possible to amend just the one line on this job description that says ability to resolve minor disputes between students with patience and cultural awareness, and add in patience, cultural awareness, and district restorative approaches techniques. And so if we could pass this tonight with that amendment and understanding that that needs approval from CSEA, maybe we could move forward that way. And I would make a motion to move forward with this job description.
But I'm ready to say something before you make the motion.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I can always make a motion, and then you can also say something.
Okay. But,
yes,
okay.
yeah. So, but I won't say it because it sounds like you're gonna wanna amend it, right? So, okay, but that's what I would suggest, that we amend, for me, that particular line.
I know, I agree with your amendment, but I just wanted to make a couple comments before the motion was made. Just in that, I wanted to ask, did this campus safety assistant come out of the safety task force? I was just curious.
I do not believe so. I wasn't, yeah, I don't believe so.
No, this is driven by the Assembly Bill language.
Okay.
But we have commented that, I mean, Dr. Wagenknecht was quietly excited that this is coming forward because, you know, our secondary schools, we have lots of positions, but our elementary sites, they have a principal. And the noon duty hourlies, they're just there, you know, making sure kids don't get in fights. We actually see this as an upgrade to help with student safety at our elementary schools.
Well, I agree. I think it's a great idea in reference to, you know, and actually maybe there might be a lead person that would be a part of the Safe Task Force. It might be an idea to ensure that there's a relationship to being with a larger task force to these positions. But I agree with the change, again, that Ms. Parker said, but I did want to just comment on the fact that whether it's 1 hour or 4 hours, I think it's important that whomever is in a position working with our students or supporting our students or reprimanding our students or in any way, that they need to have the ability and the wherewithal and the skills and the training necessary to be on campus. And so I just want to, I don't care if it's 1 hour, that can be when the incidents happen. So I'm just saying that I would appreciate that whatever these new positions, should they come forward and we actually pass the next level after the job description, that the playground supervisor and the campus safety assistant would have those training and, so, you know, understanding of how to work with children. Ms. Parker.
I'm going to go ahead and move to approve the campus safety assistant job description with the suggested amendment to the line about ability to resolve minor disputes.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
And it passes unanimously.
And then just for point of clarification, for the playground supervisor, we really do need to begin recruitment and hiring for that so that we can have our school staff. So the approval of the job description, but also we're going to go ahead and move forward with the recruitment and selection of those positions.
Well, we don't know yet.
For the playground supervisor,
Right.
it sounds like we have to, right?
I mean, is that,
If we don't do that, we won't have noon duty supervision this year until we actually hire those positions. And there's probably 40 some that we have to hire. They're all in 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour positions.
So we will give some attention to this to get you a budget. We've got a base to work with. We'll work hard to stay close to that base. It's going to go up because of this one position, but we've got to recruit because we're opening school. But we will bring some kind of financial status report to the board as soon as we can. Okay.
Doctor, can you, when later down in the discussion, you're going to be looking at multi-year budgets, could you just kind of give us a base of where that may come in later on down? So there's another opportunity to at least give us a budget for what that's going to cost to do. So are you asking us to approve that and give direction to hire in this piece?
Yes.
Okay.
Ori? All right, so, okay, now, we need to, we've already said, we know. Do we have a motion? Did we do that? Now I'm confused. Okay, we're done. All right, so you got what you need. All right. But yes, thank you for Mr. Matsuoka for moving forward and getting us that budgetary information. All right. It's that time. Nope, it's not. It's not. Just relax. Don't get too excited. We thought we were breaking for a minute. Number 8, discussion and approval of dashboard alternative school status, DASS, participation for Alta Vista, alternative junior high and high school. Ms. Carey.
Good evening, board members, and Mr. Matsuoka, Dr. Becchio, and Dr. Ramirez. We don't want to miss this one because even though I'm here standing before you, standing behind me, I'd like you to imagine Dr. Guillermo Juan, Dr. Simmons, and Lauren Berlin, who've worked with her in the transition of leadership at La Cuesta and Alta Vista, and Brian Rouse, who also supports all of our data and accountability reporting systems. This has been something that has been problematic for us. What I'm reporting tonight represents a near-term resolution to something that's been problematic for us ever since LCAP and the dashboard indicators came out, and that is it's not been a great fit for continuation in alternative high schools. Such a short presentation. So if you can picture just what kinds of indicators are featured on the regular dashboard, we will still see those indicators with the dashboard for alternative schools. But the main difference, if I'm skipping down here to bullet 4, is it was really unfair, and it felt unfair as you looked at either in SIPSA reviews or in strategic plan reviews or in any review of CASP data and dashboard indicators. La Cuesta and Alta Vista are alternative programs, but the dashboard didn't also go far enough to kind of accommodate that and speak to ways of reporting on successes that they have from kind of a different reference point. And so that's what this will really do, is give us a sense of, okay, what happens to students once they begin their enrollment at La Cuesta or Alta Vista Independent Study or middle college? Do they matriculate? Instead of having that be kind of diluted by the data over the 4 years of a student's career in high school. So automatically continuation schools were funneled by CDE into this alternative dashboard space, but alternative schools have to apply to have this kind of alternative dashboard accountability system. So the criteria for applying for that is 70% students at designated high risk. And it's they sometimes use this interchangeably with that phrase unduplicated pupil count, but it is actually a much broader set of categories that allow an alternative program to be eligible. So in addition to low income and foster youth, there's also pregnant and parenting, there's habitually truant, there's severely credit deficient. I mean, there's all kinds of categories that can designate a student as high risk when we're in the alternative school universe. By those criteria, both our Alta Vista Alternative High School, which remember has 3 programs within it, and then our Alta Vista Alternative Junior High School, which is synonymous with the Quetzal program, are eligible to apply to be participants in the Alternative School Dashboard program. So these are programs that did not have dashboards that came out in the last fall 2017 when we got those dashboards that were school specific for everyone. In fact, it was at that point that the State Board of Education had required CDE to work on that and to tell us that those would be forthcoming. So again, folks like Dr. Simmons have been eagerly awaiting this kind of better fit accountability system, and we want to be participants in it in this fall. And to do that, we need just a record of your approval from this board meeting. There's paperwork we submit, and that's why I'm sharing this with you now. So are there any questions for me about this presentation or about what it is we're hoping to pursue?
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
Is there going to be a different way in tracking the attendance for students that are doing like the homeschooling or middle college, as opposed to La Cuesta, which is traditionally like an everyday program?
I believe that is kind of built into how they, so when you think of, say, the attendance for like the Senior Plus program, where they're required to attend 3 days a week. So it would be attendance as measured against that expectation. So the adjustment is made at the expectation end, not necessarily on the reporting end, unless Dr. Weigand has a different understanding.
Students in the Quetzal program are on a seat-based, so that's like similar to LaQuest or any other school. Independent study students, so that includes middle college, senior year plus, and the traditional independent study, their attendance is actually based on their work production. So they either produce their weekly work and get full attendance, or they don't, and it's as if they were absent.
So for the case of Senior Plus, they're expected to attend 3 days a week and complete 1.5 units weekly, I think is the expectation. And so there are adjustments made just by nature of the program, but you would see percentages reported similarly that we see them reported other places.
I think it's great. I remember talking to Dr. Simmons about this. She's like, when are we going to have something like
Right.
this? So anyway, it's very exciting.
It's welcome.
Yes, very welcomed. So, is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's carried. I did want to ask my fellow board members before we break, we do have the discussion of the PE staffing in elementary schools, and I believe probably quite a few in the audience might be relational to that particular topic along with these young children. And so I wondered if we could move that to number 1 in our discussion agenda, if we were in agreement. All right, so we will be moving the agenda item for report discussion number 4 to number 1. So if you're here for that, then know that we're going to have a 5-minute break, and then we will be coming back. Thank you. So we are going to move to a report discussion agenda item that was number 4. We're moving it up to number 1. Discussion of physical education, PE staffing in elementary schools for 2018-19. Dr. Ramirez.
I have some public comment. Would you like to see the public comment first?
Oh.
I have two.
Okay, yes, we'll have some public comment first.
Yes. Okay, Julia Bowman, to be followed by Christy Lozano.
Good evening, Board. Good evening, Superintendent, Dr. Ramirez. Thank you for having us this evening. Wasn't planning on speaking, so I'll be brief. I'm the one that wrote the letter. My name is Julia Bowen. I'm one of the letters you received. I'm a teacher at Monroe School. And what occurred to me, in addition to what my points were in the letter, which I won't go into right now, but basically from the professional perspective, to begin the implementation in full earnest of our new language arts program, having already participated in the Lucy Calkins writing program, I am on fire. I am so inspired. This is so exciting to me that we're going to have this cohesive Lucy Calkins program. It's what I was hoping for, and when I got to vote on it and it came through, I was ecstatic, and I'm not alone. So I also know what the time requirements are. This program doesn't come with that little package of everything all laid out. It requires hours and hours of study and poster making, which is critical. I mean, second grade isn't even going to get, trained in this, and yet we're starting off in it, which is awesome because, we gotta tie it in, we gotta get this going. But is it time to cut, again, from a very professional point of view, is it really time to cut our prep and professional learning committee team work time when we really want to implement this program into its fullest potential? And I'm just asking you to take a moment and ponder that. Maybe anyway, maybe you'll revisit that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christy Lozano. Good evening, board, Mr. Matsuoka. Dr. Vecchio, Dr. Ramirez. I was the PE teacher at McKinley Elementary, and I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but listening to this discussion, it was hard to hear of the exchange that was being discussed. I did restorative approaches at McKinley during the lunchtime hour over there. I did lots of conversations with the kids, and as a PE teacher, I also fulfilled those other roles, and so I am very passionate about PE. I think that when kids have a hard time academically, which the kids at McKinley do, when they it is offset by something they're successful in, learning to ride bicycles, running and accomplishing things, getting stronger, getting fitter, kind of that athletics piece that keep kids in school and high schools, keep them from dropping out. I saw that happen with the kids at McKinley, and it kind of helped them to dig deep and take the challenge of learning in academics. And I had 3 years over there. I built really good relationships with them. And so I realized when I got to the elementary level, I had already taught 8 years at the high school level, 4 years junior high. And when I got to elementary, I realized this is where it's at. These kids need this physical education foundation young, because when they get to junior high, it's really hard for them to want to learn or to be vulnerable enough to learn at that age. And so I loved every minute at the elementary school. The kids were always excited to learn, and there was a lot in the Audacious Foundation funding the bicycle program, and we had pool programs where kids learned to swim, and I supported all of those programs. I helped coordinate those programs, and it was establishing some things for kids in our community that they can do lifelong fitness, not just sports minded, but things they could take out and do for the rest of their lives. And so I am a big advocate. I love teaching PE, and I loved teaching it at elementary school, and so I think it's really important. I think we should have 2 at every school, and I know that sounds probably kind of crazy, but the time that the kids should get learning those skills, I think, is
30
invaluable.
seconds.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we will now move to Dr. Ramirez's report.
Well, good evening, board, cabinet, community. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the status of staffing of physical education in elementary schools. Included in your board packet was a narrative in this presentation intended to frame the discussion. As you will note, there are multiple components that are highly related and relevant to this discussion. I'm glad to see community present to engage in public discourse. It is one of the cornerstones of civic engagement. I have also received several pieces of communication from stakeholders, and one of the common threads that ran through them was a desire to see this discussion through the lens of equity. And it is with that lens that I would welcome the community to engage with this presentation as well. So just by way of background, again, just really a broad perspective, you'll see 2 things throughout this presentation, and there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are a couple of different components that need to be represented in order to give us a more accurate picture of staffing and the functionality of our programming. But by way of background, you have just physical education obviously is a core component for us. It's one of the reasons that staffing in fact exists in our elementary schools. And it's also a component of Ed Code. And Ed Code calls for 200 minutes every 10 days of core instruction. So it is one of those components that is brought to us through statute. Our district model is a little bit different and has evolved historically in a different way. Historically, PE is taught by in most other schools or school districts, it is taught by the general education teacher as a function of being a multiple subject credentialed professional. But our district model calls for for PE teachers in the elementary schools. And part of the model is to serve grades TK through 6, or and TK wherever that grade level exists, which is at all of our campuses. Another point of background is that it's been supported through LCAP funding, or supplemental funding found in LCAP. And that will, continue into 18-19. To my recollection and based on my research, it was at least from the outset of the first iteration of LCAP, a function of those aims. So, as an overview of the model, and I don't want to pretend to frame this in an exhaustive fashion, but this is really intended to frame some of the main aims of the program and some of the ways in which it is reflected in LCAP. So first and foremost, we aspire to have a quality physical education program. It's important for students to have structured activity and a wide range of structured activities where they can maintain physical fitness, emotional fitness, and also just good habits that extend far beyond just that scope. I mentioned in my narrative elements of collaboration, elements of teamwork, perseverance, so on and so forth. We know are important components of athletics and represented that way in our PE program at the elementary. The other component that I think it's important for us to discuss at this point is also, and it alludes to a little bit of what Ms. Bowen was commenting about, which is that it provides embedded release time for our elementary teachers. Now, what does that mean? That means release time within the instructional day to be able to plan as a PLC. And the theory of action in this case is rather simple, but very important. It is that through that PLC collaboration, there will be improved outcomes for students. And those are really to support school-based professional learning communities as they engage in planning, data analysis, and just onboarding of professional learning, just to name some broad categories. And in that regard, it does also require a special schedule to be developed along with art and music. Some schools refer to it as wheel time or an elementary wheel, but it is a separate component. And the reason that I bring both of these here is because they are very interrelated and very relevant to this discussion. So this is a piece where I wanted to just spend a few minutes because this is an important piece to consider and where I'll spend a little bit of time. One of the things that has come to us is more recognition and acknowledgement that the way in which we allocate our time is critical. You'll see in the slide that one of the things, while everything else has changed around us, assessments, all of the rigor and breadth of every single one of our content standards with more on the way, what stayed very finite is both the number of instructional days and the number of instructional minutes. Now, why that's important to this discussion is because as we discuss staffing, we also have to recognize what staffing in our program model does, not just narrowly for any one particular content area, but rather for the cumulative. So, for example, in this discussion, it's important to just acknowledge what we have brought in order to consider core instruction. When you start to tally the number of minutes that need to be allocated to each one of these disciplines and domains, you are really talking about numbers of minutes that far outweigh what's available to us. And why that's important to this discussion is because it's one of those things that I know that has been represented in some of the communications and some of the questions that I've received from the board as well. So just to give you a frame of reference, the minutes for first grade in an entire year total about 51,000. Okay, sounds like a lot of minutes. But when we start to break them down by day and then within the day, different format of days, for example, Wednesday's an early release, you start to see that there's more to this. But the other reason for this is because we have to really consider how much core instruction kids receive. And one of the shifts, although we've been very intentional, but one of the shifts that in looking at how elementary schools are unfolding their master schedule is that we have not been primed yet in two areas at least, in looking at an analysis of these master schedules. And that is in the area of English language development, ELD, and in science. For those of you who are familiar with the shifts of the next generation science standards, we'll table assessment for just a moment, but just the rigors of creating opportunities that are more hands-on, experiential, inquiry-based. What has happened is we've tried to bring forward practices that no longer fit. So what you would see in an analysis, or what I've seen in an analysis of how time is allocated, one of the things that comes across is that science is happening very intermittently. And it has to do with just, again, the overall impact of new learning, or learning that is now put on par in science with ELA, math, and social studies, in a way in which perhaps historically we haven't prioritized. And so it's important context for us to consider when we start talking about minutes, when we start talking about, what kind of programming we ultimately engage in with our students, because it's just as important a component as what we talk about when we talk about staffing levels. Okay. So in terms of enrollment and staffing, and this is also in the narrative, as with staffing, all of our staffing, it is very, very deeply connected to enrollment. And in the narrative as well, there was just a little table that calculated or depicted our anticipated enrollment. And we really have two categories of elementary schools broadly, and those are our small schools and then our larger elementary schools. And something that was not made explicit in the narrative is that the large schools will be staffed at a one full-time equivalent teacher, one full-time PE teacher. With the small schools, we needed to start looking at things a little differently, and that is because of some of the phenomena around enrollment fluctuations. Most of them, in most instances, kind of trending downward, and also just represent that this shift started in the 17-18 school year with 3 schools, SBCA, Harding, and Cleveland. And we looked at McKinley and Monroe as following this model for the 18-19 school year. So again, with the distinctions, an important distinction to draw between like an elementary and secondary, and it's one of the challenges that's inherent in elementary, is that we can't operate by sections. So you were very familiar with a .2 or an additional section. Well, because our time isn't necessarily compartmentalized that way, coming up with funding levels that are in between is very, very difficult without really some major trade-off. As it is even in a model like the one that we've proposed and moved forward with. So I do want to represent that and just bring the board's attention to that reality. The last component of this is the funding model, and I think the way to represent this is that the LCAP supplemental funds, there is an initiative, an action that calls out an allocation that then is distributed evenly to each one of the elementaries. And that is not, the funds there do not reach a limit where they would cover the cost of an entire position. And because our teachers are at different levels in the salary schedule, given their background, their experience, and a number of other factors, what it creates is just differences of how it ultimately is manifested in a school's budget. But the offset of it comes from school-based discretionary or funds that to which the school has discretion. And there is variability in that. And when you're talking about a budget at an elementary school that is small, you're talking about different economies of scale. And the budget that is allocated to a school of 325 or 350 is different than one for 600 students. So that's just another variable, another factor to consider. And then finally, just important to recognize and just cite that there are some additional resources and sources of revenue that are that exist at some of our schools that just do not exist in some of our others. And you saw one of those examples where one of our schools is offsetting some of this cost through partnership and arrangements with their foundation. So this is just a broad overview intended to just elicit a conversation, and so I do open it up to the board for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. Board, Ms. Parker. I appreciate you framing it that way, Dr. Ramirez, because I do want to make sure that everybody understands that this is not an action item. This is not something that we will be voting on. That this is an opportunity for us to raise more questions and then have a wider community discussion. And in some ways, this opens up the giant discussion around things like both grants and foundations and PTAs, and different ways that schools fundraise and the inequity in that. And I'm going to speak, you gave an overview for the elementary district. I'm going to speak a lot about Monroe and McKinley because we're hearing mostly from the Monroe community. And so I want to be specific to that. And so I just want to note, I want to say that I don't expect you to have answers to these questions, that there are things that I just hope that we can continue to talk about. One big question I had is how come we are hearing from Monroe and not from McKinley? And so a question I have is, what does PE look like at McKinley? Because when I looked at their single plan, both for 17-18 and 18-19, I saw that the Audacious Foundation is supporting their PE program. And so they may look like they're getting a part-time PE person, but are they actually getting a part-time PE person, or is it being supplemented through this grant? And so that's a question that I have. And a question that I have for you right now that I think you can answer is, you say that each elementary school, doesn't matter which size, gets $40,487. Okay, so I guess my question mark is, the larger schools, it sounds like, are then using their site funds to supplement that, to get a 1.0. But that's not a district decision, that's a site decision to do so. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that has been true since PE went into the LCAP. And in fact, the district is contributing more now than it did 2 years ago, according to this. So I guess my question is this a district decision to reduce PE at Monroe, or is it a Monroe decision to reduce PE at Monroe? Because and I raise that because that's a site council decision about how they spend their money. And when I look at the single plan that we approved this spring for 2018-2019, the site council signed off on hiring a full-time physical education teacher. And that's how they decided that they were going to spend their money. And so I don't understand how it is that that has changed if we haven't changed our contribution, and if they knew how much money they had in the spring. So that, I don't know if you can answer that right now, but that's a question that I have.
So I actually would like to take a pass at answering the question around the Audacious Foundation. So I think it's important, having worked with them for a number of years now, that that I'm very clear that they actually do not pay for staffing. It's one of it's one of their views around just how they interact with us as a district. So that's just important for us to represent. But absolutely, they do support in a number of different ways that is incredibly beneficial to our schools. That said, to come back to your last question, what I would say is that I don't know the full details of any conversations that may have occurred with the school site council. So I don't have that at my disposal. What I can tell you is that certainly things do change and shift from even a preliminary budget, which is essentially what the schools received, you know, and that they had to represent in the single plan over the course of time. Those things do happen. So I would say that we have been, from a district office perspective, helpful in trying to work through with our site leaders on what options are available, what models might be helpful to around staffing, as we would any other form of staffing, even those that tend to originate from the school level. So to represent it as exclusively from the school would not be accurate. To represent it exclusively from the district would also be inaccurate. So I think it has been a collaboration over several years, as the narrative, you know, states, where there have been decisions made intentionally to bring staffing levels more in line with enrollment.
Can you tell us whether or not site budgets went down from spring to now?
No, nothing has changed in the preliminary budgets.
Then I think that whatever comes back to us, I would really love to hear from the Monroe Site Council because they have authority over how these site budgets are spent, and they vote on that. And so I understand that there are trade-offs, but the Site Council needed to be included in that, and I want to be sure that they were. And I would just like more clarity, because it really doesn't sound like the district has changed anything from the past few years. I had been imagining before I saw all this documentation that we had been supporting 1.0s at all these places, when in fact we've been giving a base amount to every place. And some places have been choosing to spend it this way or that way. And I understand that the smaller schools have less, and I always have felt it from Monroe, because they have been, it's really clear when you look at PTA fundraising and when you look at outside grant fundraising, that because they have a lower number of Title I students than say an Adams or a Franklin or a McKinley, that they tend to get less of the supplemental funds from the community, who don't see them as needing that kind of support when they do. And they are not able to raise the kind of money that a Washington or a Roosevelt can through the PTA. So I really do believe it's important that we be as equitable as we can, but we need to be transparent about it. And we need to think about, I think in this situation, we need to think about Monroe in particular, and that it's important at the district level to keep an eye on these numbers. I think we tend to, well, you know how much these schools make for PTA fundraising, but we really don't look, because it's not in the single plan. Donations are not in the single plan. And so there's no place that we see as a board where schools are getting, you know, how wildly divergent they can become on the donation side. And then to see where there might be holes where it's important for the district to step in. And so I want us to think about that, and as we move forward with this discussion, to keep that in mind too.
Thank you. Ms. Sims-Moton?
Thank you, Ms. Parker, for those comments. The comment that I wanted to ask too in your last slide before the question, it says additional sources of revenue exist for some schools and not all, and I get that. So is there any support that we're helping those schools that are not able to do that on their own? Is there some technical assistance how to do it, you know, so some way to be able to be in an equitable way, those who don't have those resources, how are we as a district helping those issues?
Broadly speaking, there are. I mean, and part of it is the mechanism by which Ms. Parker alluded to, some of the distribution of funds to which the schools have discretion, whether they be Title I or supplemental, are contingent upon the demographics of the students they serve. So that is one way in which that is brought forward. The other one, of course, and we've been very diligent about making better and better, more informed, more transparent, more consistent, and just more judicious decisions around all staffing, and making sure that our staffing just is very much clear to schools, to school principals, school leadership, about how decisions are made. And there's a whole entire set of meetings and ecosystem that develops around that. What I would like to represent is that it is going to always be a challenge to reach equity when the disproportionality is so great. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference. And it's important to keep that in mind, because it's something that we will always, I suspect, encounter, is a disproportionality that exists in how some schools are able to receive support and what that support looks like. And while no leader would have 100% discretion over that, there is a great deal of influence. And of course, it's on the part of the willingness of those parent groups, those foundations, and of course, those social networks that allow that disproportionality to persist. The extent to which we can mitigate that has always been at the core of our work in trying to bring equity to bear. But it's not easy to be found when it comes to very finite resources like funding.
So I would ask, just in that conversation, so how do we, if we have those schools that are able to do that, is there an opportunity for to really focus on the schools that don't have that, whether that's training, whether that's community conversations, bringing other sources to that, so increasing that effort when the others are pretty much floating on their own and don't need as much support, but those that don't have that, the sophistication, however you call it, so those efforts, I would think, need to be increased. And how do we do that? Maybe that's a conversation with the funding roundtable that goes out into the community to really, to lift that equity in terms of that. That has to be the conversation. It has to be that concerted effort. I'm not saying that you don't, but I'm just saying while the others are able to do that, we have a small few that are not. And so how can we make more concerted effort to be able to lift that piece? And it may be in conversations, again, it may be in effort in, training, whatever. But I just think that it's important to increase our resources, and be that time or whatever, our resources to helping those that don't have that opportunity and don't have that sophistication to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Sims-Mountain. I want to, first of all, say, Dr. Ramirez, I appreciated your framing of the way of looking at this in terms of the equity model. And I think what's important in that framing was, again, coming back to this came out of the LCAP, but the equity piece. And so I feel as a district that is our number one purposeful plan in our LCAP plan, but also as a district in terms of what we look to. And so I think when we look at positions, staffing positions in schools, that we know research states that the importance of PE. We know that not only is it for, like you said, physical reasons or for benefits of health, reducing obesity, it's also very beneficial for our special needs students. Actually, one of my grad students is doing research currently on the motivation of using PE in supporting her students in the classroom and the need for that physical activity. And the challenges that she faces because she doesn't have a full-time PE person on campus. But I feel like with PE, as in with music and with art, these have been our staples in our schools. And to say that because a school happens to be small and in terms of population, and that they're not provided with the benefits other schools have, and therefore, just because there's a smaller amount of students and there's not as many opportunities, for example, Audacious Foundation or parent to PTSA groups for those particular schools, and maybe they don't have the training or skills to rally up funds, that I agree with Ms. Sims-Moten that perhaps we need to rethink a way of how we might ensure that we can have the same opportunity for all of our students. We say that about, and I also want to reiterate the fact that, yes, I understand the importance of, and what I'm sorry, your name was, I got it here, because I actually printed out your letter, Ms. Bowen, because I really appreciated your comments, because I know as a teacher, the time, like you even stated, the importance of that PLC time. So there's a lot of things to weigh, but I feel like there are, before we add on, as we talked earlier, new positions and we add on new opportunities for other positions, we really have to look at what we have now and make sure that are we doing everything we can to ensure that our students across the district, across elementary schools, are getting what they deserve in terms of a PE course. And I also will just say, as an elementary school teacher, I had to teach PE, and that was a scary thing. It was not a good thing. I had at one point had to teach coaching volleyball, which of course I didn't play volleyball. So I know that there are things that go on out there that you kind of wonder, what kind of PE is actually going on, you know? So anyway, I just would hope in this discussion, and I really appreciate Ms. Parker's comments, because I didn't know that piece about the site council. So I just feel like there's a lot of threads that we need to ensure that we're looking at when we discuss this funding model. Ms. Parker? And Mr. Perez, we go.
It's late, it's good.
I know.
So I won't repeat anything that's already been said, but just kind of like with my manager cap on, just looking at the numbers of students that the PE teachers would see at one of the larger schools. You know, Franklin having 523, Adams having 596, but then splitting McKinley-Monroe having well over 700 students. I mean, that's kind of a bandwidth question for me. You know, like, we wouldn't ask necessarily, you know, standard teacher at a secondary school, 5 periods plus a prep. You know, we wouldn't ask a teacher to get paid to teach 6 periods and get paid the exact same thing as someone getting paid working 5 periods with, you know, prep. So kind of my question is, you know, bandwidth-wise, you know, what is the limit for how many students a PE teacher can see, you know, realistically, without having to bring on somebody else? If we're asking them to take on a lot more students, what is the pay increase going to look like? Because again, Rose, you know, I think Adams has the highest at 596, but if you have somebody going to McKinley and Monroe, that's 764 students that they're potentially going to see. That's a huge caseload. I mean, you know, think of it like our counselors, again, in our secondaries. You're not going to throw an extra 200, 300 students on a counselor's caseload because it's already in the hundreds, not without any kind of like real compensation for that. So if we're, again, part of the conversation, if we're going to go forward with really what I'm saying overload on these PE teachers, you know, we really need to look at how we're funding them, how we're compensating them, to make sure that we're not burning, and also how are we taking care of them, because we don't want to burn them out. You know, if somebody's used to working with 500 students, but then throwing on an extra 200, I again, as somebody who's been a manager, that feels like a lot. You know, it feels like a burden not only on the teachers but also on the schools. as well, because it really will, again, in my mind, I've started up programs, I've had to do everything myself with like one other person, and I know what kind of burnout comes with that. So, yeah, just kind of a manager cap. I agree with Ms. Park. I love Ms. Parker's comments about the site council, so we can look into that as well. But just again, on a ground level question is capacity, compensation, and what kind of prep are we letting them have? What kind of care, and are we, affecting the quality of education and instruction in those times, in that subject for those students?
Ms. Parker?
Quick question, Cleveland and Harding, have they been splitting a PE teacher?
They have.
So, I think that in the long run, it sounds like we have a lot of big equity and funding questions to discuss. In the short run, in this particular case with Monroe, I do think it's important that we follow the code and honor what the site council voted on, and if they have made a different decision, then we need to see that. And I think it'd be great to understand, because my initial reaction was, when I was first hearing about this, was like, well, it's not fair for us to fund 1.0 here and half there, and that we should just take the money and divide it and put it equally at all the school sites, but it turns out that that's what we already do. And so there're just questions for me about how this has moved forward. And I appreciate that we'll get more answers as we move forward in the next few weeks.
Yes, thank you. And it was enlightening to know when I got your email in the question of is the site responsible, the school site responsible for the other half, of the funding of the FTE, and so that was really enlightening, because then I thought, well, what's going on at the site? What is the principal's, discussion around the budget relational to this? Because we're getting it from this end, but what's actually happening at the school site, and what does the principal have to say about why it's not being utilized out of their site budget plan?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving forward, we will go back to number 1, discussion of new course approvals. Ms. Carey.
For the sake of our audience, because we move things around, can I ask that we make that one last, the course approvals? Because we have a team from Dos Pueblos High School here who've been waiting about the CTE Pavilion report.
Of course. So we will now move to number 2, update on CTE Pavilion at Dos Pueblos High School. Mr. Matsuoka. Of course, wait, does the board agree?
Well, in the dead of summer, and it kind of is the dead of summer, we're excited to bring this report to you. I hope when you read it, your eyes kind of went, whoa, because this is Santa Barbara at its finest. This is, the public-private partnerships that exist in this community are, I've never seen anything like it. So here we go. So the original vision for the CTE Pavilion, if you recall, we had a budget space of $5 million to replace 8 portables. They're in that southwest corner. What's the name of those? Is it the G buildings? Q building? Q. The Q wing. It's an oddball collection of buildings. They're raised foundations and they're old portables. And so it was Amir's and Emily's idea to leverage that and apply for the CTEP money. And they gave up Veterans Day and Thanksgiving, and that's how they spent their Thanksgiving, and they cranked it together. And with John Dent, they secured $4.2 million of state funding, and that is virtually in the bank. I mean, it's going to come. So now the budget is 9.2, essentially $10 million. And the project went from, I skipped a step on this slide, from 8,000 square feet of old portables to 14,000 feet of new CTE shared space. Of course, the vision continues, and so Amir and Emily have been having conversations with the foundations out in our community. And now the vision is $17.2 million, another $8 million of capital raised money, and the total square footage is 24,000 square feet, mostly indoor space, but some outdoor space, but amazing outdoor space, instructional outdoor space. So that's the lead-in. That itself is just quite a story. So just a reminder, DP was informed back in spring 2018 about the $4.2 million. There was one academy that was not funded. It was the Information Communication Technology Program. Now, we had already matched it up, that's $870,000. So we had the match prepared. We just have this gap. So as I explained in the narrative, we see information technology, coding, programming so integrated in with this whole pavilion space that we are working with the architects to design that space in. And as I said in the narrative, where is the gap going to be filled? This storefront project, we've got prototype number 2 almost done, and we're going to evaluate that. And then I think we have enough data from these 2 classrooms to then get an architect to just map out what's the cost for the entire school. We think there's about 80 to 85 classrooms where we should take out those old walls and put in the new walls with windows and fans. So we're going to do a detailed analysis very quickly because the budget questions, keep coming. So remember we asked you to move some money for the track, and then we're going to come with hopefully a positive budget analysis of storefront, because we really believe the $870,000 should be backfilled so that this whole thing, it's going to go from 17.2 to $18 million as a total scope. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandy Seal, who I would say only Kate Parker's got the history. This goes back to...
I'm sitting here going, Dr. Seal, wow, you just, you're the ever-ready bunny, whatever it is, the Energizer bunny.
Just old.
Leave your back for more.
I am. So it's a long history, but I'll make it quick. In 2007, Amir and Emily wrote a grant for some CTE funding and secured $3 million for a new building on the DP campus, with a catch that the $3 million had to be matched. And the school district was not in a position to help out with that. So a bunch of parents got together. We founded a 501c3, that is the DP Engineering Academy Foundation. We were incorporated in December of 2007, and we successfully raised the $3 million. The building came in, KBZ was the architect, Skipper was the builder. It came in under budget and on schedule. And in that time, while that process was going on, the foundation sort of coalesced to continue to support the Engineering Academy, and it still exists. It raises the annual funds for the program, provides long-term planning and oversight of certain aspects of fundraising. So I was chair of that foundation for 11 years. 10 years is pretty much the useful lifetime, I think, of a person serving on a nonprofit board. So I stepped off in February and handed it over. 2 of the 3 officers right now are actually alumni of the Engineering Academy. So there's some young people running it, and it's very exciting. And then that was February. In April, Amir came to me with this amazing idea and said, would you help? And I said, well, that's a really amazing idea, and I can help with the fundraising. So we have met with some local philanthropists, and Linda Weinman of lynda.com has offered to actually lead this capital campaign, and my participation would be to function as her staff as we do that. And I am now, 5 years ago, I left my full-time career as a scientist, and I actually now raise money for science full-time. I went from science to fundraising for science. So it is my profession, and we've met with Linda a few times, and she has a really good plan lined up. We've met with a few other people. I do believe this is completely possible.
We've done a presentation to the DPEA Foundation Board, and they voted to sort of give me the authority to act on their behalf for fundraising. So I will be reporting to them as we go forward and to you all. So that's very quick. Any questions for me before I turn it over? Okay, Kate knows all this history, but the rest of you are new.
Any questions? All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
So I'm going to invite Amir and Emily to share the vision for a STEAM Teaching and Learning Museum.
Okay, I would like to introduce myself as Emily Shire. Not everyone knows me, and I would like the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Amir's wife, and the Engineering Academy really is our second child. And as we've been explaining that to people, this is our daughter here, Aaliyah, our real child and our actual child. And the Engineering Academy is, in every sense of the word, our brainchild. And so I just wanted to bring that forward, that it is very much a family affair, and in every way that it could be, it is like our child. And we talk about it, we live and breathe it, you know. You sweat about it, and you worry about it, and you nurture it, and all those things. And so I just wanted to share that over the years I've worn many hats, both literal and figurative. And I've worked a lot with admissions and outreach, and particularly spent a lot of energy to ensure that we have 50% women represented in our program. That was a mission of ours from the beginning, and we have worked hard to keep that going. I also wanted to share that our motto at the Engineering Academy is go big or go home. And that when we started to undertake the grant writing process in the fall for these 3 grants, we actually wanted to go bigger. And Dr. Matsuoka helped us kind of rein that in a little bit, but we were really passionate about the vision at that point, and we were thrilled that it came to pass. We're very excited about the potential of this STEAM museum because it ties in so beautifully with the larger vision for Dos Pueblos High School. We've identified a school-wide learning initiative to increase student engagement through the development of authentic project-based learning experiences in all classrooms and all departments. And that's an initiative that the site leadership team, which I am a part of, we identified that, and we've been working on that for 2 years. And the CTE programs, including ours and media and computer science, are set to work together to lead that charge. And we're looking forward to the interprogrammatic collaboration that will be possible by bringing all 3 of these things together. And again, with this expansion and this museum concept, we are excited about the access opportunities that will be possible to the larger community. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Amir to talk a little bit about the vision, and then we're going to hear from the architects. They're going to share the schematics we've been developing in the last few months. Thank you.
As much as I'm go big or go home, as we're talking about this, I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, are we going to be able to pull this off? I'm excited about it, though. It's good. We're saying it, so we're going to achieve it. The vision really for this project, the idea is this. We have been working with our students really in the quest to do authentic educational experiences. As someone who came from engineering and then went and began teaching physics and found myself transitioning into, I really would refer to myself as like a glorified test, like prep guru, you know, all my kids are getting 5s on the AP test, and it all sounds good. But when I really compared it to what the kids needed to be successful at, and when I looked at how much time I was spending cheerleading them to do something versus when I would work on authentic projects with them and they would be excited about it, I really decided that for me, I wanted to push education in that direction. And so as we've been moving, we used to do robotics. I'm sure you are aware of that. And you know, we did that. That was quasi-authentic. What that was is it's an organization creates a competition, and we go and we participate in it. We really wanted to get to the point where what the students are working on is real. And we have found, we believe, like the perfect intersection that schools could potentially do. We're really looking to see if this is like a replicable model. And the idea is creating educational exhibits, creating educational installations. And we were at the Exploratorium, and the exhibit director said something really profound. He said, it's one thing to teach somebody something. It's another thing to create something that teaches somebody something. It's like an order of magnitude more complicated. How do you send something off into the world and have that happen? And so we've been doing that with our students successfully. We have exhibits that we've placed at Moxie, Center Museum of Art. We've been working in partnership with the Exploratorium. And in doing that, we also have, our students have been engaging with the public. But the other thing that we've been doing is we have a lot of visitors come through our program. And so we have a lot of opportunities to watch these kind of ad hoc interactions where the public comes and interacts with our students. And we have found time and time again that these experiences are the most profound. Being a teacher of students, especially the types of kind of close relationships we have with our students, the long-term relationships, it feels a lot like a parent. Like you're like, this is what's good for you. And they don't necessarily listen because you've become such like a mentor to them. And when we bring outside folks, like an engineer comes and sits down next to one of our students working on a project and starts to have a real-world conversation with that student about what they're working on, and then they're aware that that thing is going to go out into the world, it's transformative. And it's our hope that through creating this space, we can take that from the ad hoc realm, make it actually something that's intentional, that's continuous, and as a model, and then also have it be a benefit. I mean, in terms of outreach, the value of having a museum space that young people can come and visit, that they can interact with our students. I mean, it's basically a museum by the students for the community. And the idea would be that you could imagine, right now when you go to a museum, it's static. Imagine going into a museum and seeing stuff that was being developed, being invited under the caution tape to come and work on that. I mean, the power of a young person sitting next to one of our students and learning about something in that context, in that non-traditional learning environment, in that outside of normal school hours environment, that's what we're talking about. So again, it's a big idea, it's a big vision, and it really came about through visiting the Exploratorium and looking at that space and looking at the classrooms they had in there and realizing what a shame it is that there wasn't a school simultaneously, operating there. And so there are other museum schools, just so you understand, that kind of do this thing, but all of them are premised around locating like a charter school or a public school on a museum site with the idea of the kids gaining from the existence of the museum. This is a totally new model. This is the kids creating the museum. And it's our hope that High Tech High does this. They create professional quality work. We're trying to take it to the next level. We want to have as many students at Dos Pueblos High School participating and sharing their work and really setting the bar high. That's what High Tech High does. They say basically, we're not going to present stuff that's not good. We're going to be authentic with you. If it's not ready to present, it's not ready to present. The whole idea is you get it to that level, and then you take it and you show it to people and you showcase it. And I was talking to Carrie in the meeting about this, and Bill. The one thing we do showcase authentically is sports. And I think that's why so many kids, if you talk to them when they're young, it's like, I want to be a basketball player, or I want to be a football player, or whatever. The rest of their school setting is in such a state of abstraction and so disconnected from where it will ultimately connect. Most of our students are not going to go be professional athletes. And the fact that we don't give students the opportunity to participate authentically in the same way that they do sports, and it's celebrated, and celebrate that with regularity, it's a shame. And so I'm hoping that we can be the first people to really try to push this out there, and then I'm hoping that it can become something that becomes a hallmark for first Dos Pueblos, and then we can look to see how can we incorporate this type of authentic learning in as many of our classrooms as possible with as many of our teachers as possible. That's the vision.
Thank you.
Any questions for Emily or me?
Ms. Parker?
I'm going to have questions, but I think I'm going to wait to the very end. So there you go.
Okay.
Anyone else? Actually, I have a question. Sorry. I think it's amazing what you all have created. It's amazing, and I think the authenticness of it and the student creation inquiry approach is fabulous. And And so the question that I have is, one of the lines that I read in your narrative was, we envision educational field trips for elementary school classes during school hours on weekdays and museum functionality on weekends and during the summertime, including special events, exhibitions, workshops, and classes. And one of the things you kept stating was that the giving to connect to the community at large. And so I'm really interested in the connection to our district community in terms of our elementary schools, our pathways, our access for our students to be able to get and have the opportunity to interact with those students. And perhaps eventually they might be able to apply and through an admissions process, which we're not going into that now, but the idea that all students would have access and understanding of what's going on over there at that amazing place. And so my question is, how is that part of the plan? I mean, how are we going to engage perhaps teachers in our current elementary schools now to be able to have access and a knowledge and excitement for those students to move forward in that pathway? And I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that you said 50% of your admissions were women, and so I'm looking. I think that's fabulous, and also we also equity across ethnicities. So how are we ensuring that? But back to really my question is, how do you envision this program and this museum integrating with what we have here in our district?
Right. So one of the things that I'd like to say, so I've talked at length, I think, with Kerry about this, and he's cautioned me about some of these things. So I want to be transparent about this. We just heard from Dr. Ramirez, and he's talking about the limited amount of minutes. So I think that what I would hope is that within that limited amount of minutes, we could create something that was compelling enough to make sure that the students could do that. I mean, in my vision of what I would love to see, I would love to see a situation where students learn about the program, they come there in the space that we've got an actual teaching classroom that's set up to both train teachers, but it's there also as a space that's available so that we can, with regularity, should we be able to do this, invite young people in there to learn from our students. And our students would serve as docents, as mentors, et cetera, as part of their coursework. We're already doing that to some degree. It's ad hoc. The idea is, how do you structure that teaching and how do you build into the school day, especially for our senior students who have 3 periods with us? They have time in their day, and we could move the students around, and it's still a valuable learning opportunity for them to work with these young people. So I think what we would do is we would look and we would say, the first thing would be for us to generate something that we felt was educationally compelling, so that when we brought the students there, I mean, I think at its core, the outreach component of it, just the seeing, I mean, there's so many layers to this, but basically seeing someone that is 5, 6, 7, 8 years older than you, who is creating professional work, who you've maybe seen their exhibit at Moxie, or you see what they're working on. As a young person, it's so much more profound than going to a museum space and seeing something that was created by who knows what. I mean, I can tell you, some 50-year-old guy in a machine shop. I mean, that's who makes exhibits. And so the idea that we could show these young folks who is capable of doing this, and everybody gets invited to the table, that's the power of that. So I think that in what I would like to do, but again, out of respect for the minutes that are available, we would propose that we bring grade alike groups, and if we could, it would be something that we would incorporate with all of the students in the district. They would come for one trip, they would learn about the program, they would learn about our exhibits and walk through the museum space, and then they would also have an educational experience that would take place, some kind of making experience. And then in addition to that, we also envision being able to train teachers in this space. So I think we've done this already. We've done it kind of in these long-term kind of sabbatical programs. But the idea is being able to offer and work and support professional development. Right now, people fly. We just had people from Brazil here, 5 days ago. People are coming from all over the world to learn about what we're doing, inviting us to go to Brazil to help them with their 16,000 person college. I mean, this is what's happening. The idea that we aren't tapping into ourselves as a resource to support our local elementary school teachers and high school teachers, I think we should be doing that more. So I'm hoping that this space that we're creating will formalize that. Right now, it's you don't really come to like a teaching and learning institute. You come to the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, and we can kind of make space for that kind of transfer of knowledge. But I think that what I would hope to see is formalized. I mean, we get professional development right now in our district from like the Buck Institute and these other entities. We envision, I mean, we believe that we have learned a lot. We have a lot to offer, and we'd like to collaborate with people to continue to learn ourselves and to help share all that we've done, working the many hours that we've worked, you know, helping other people have access. So the more that we can have the interconnectedness, the better. I mean, to me, that's the whole thing. It's built to do that. And I would say that one more piece is that, you know, money. I've just sat through a very sobering discussion of money with PE teachers in the elementary schools. There are opportunities even for us to support that, where we as the DPEA and DPAF can write grants to these organizations that do support these types of outreach activities. I think it's very compelling to have our students as part of the outreach, our teachers as part of the outreach, and I could envision us being able to fund the bus rides and take care of that. I mean, that's what we see happening. That's how we see that being possible, and that's how we've been thinking about it. I think Emily has something to say too.
Just really quick, Dr. Reed, what you're pointing out in the question that you have about access to the students in our own community, that's actually fundamental to this vision, and it's one that I'm most passionate about, to be honest, as the person who's been leading the admissions and outreach efforts for the Engineering Academy in the last 10 years. It's really striking to see when we present to students, we bring students to the junior highs and we have these presentations. The students always, so many of them say, I had no idea what this was. I didn't even know this existed. I never would have thought I would be an engineer. I can't believe I'm going to apply. And the parents say the same thing. I can't believe my daughter, my son, whatever, came home and they were so excited to apply. Because it is about access. If you don't know the opportunity is there, how can you seize upon it? So of course, we do want the students to be coming during school time. And this is actually modeled after an opportunity that we developed at the McCormick House years ago with our Carousel of Physics. And that's an annex for the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. And we actually had 15 to 20 elementary schools come, and we developed curriculum for them. It was like a 3-hour experience, and they rotated through. They were with the students. They learned a little about art history. They did an interactive activity. They built a 3D model. And all of the teachers said, can you please do more of this? I've never seen my students so excited about science. And that's at the heart of what we're doing. And as myself, I have an elementary credential, and I'm very passionate about this particular work. And the other piece I wanted to say is that you were mentioning about admissions. We do not anticipate being able to admit all of the students who are interested, but part of what I find really compelling about this museum is that it offers opportunities for students to have access, whether they're in the Engineering Academy or not, and they're open to everyone. Because not only would it be an interactive museum experience, but we would also offer classes, tutorials, interactives. They can come in and they can learn to use the machines. They can do 3D projects, after school opportunities, summer school opportunities. So for us, this vision really comes from a place of how can we do more for everyone? And that's so who I am, and that's so what I'm about, and Amir as well.
Well, thank you. I think it's exciting. I also think that for the, perhaps, I mean, I think a lot of brainstorming, you know, I know you're trying to get this off the ground, but the conversations with, you know, different schools. I know I met with a teacher that had gone through your program and is now back at Adams. And the excitement that came out of that and what sparked out of that. So, I mean, how can we, you know, envision, you know, bringing that sort of robust, energetic, synergetic opportunities for these teachers, and then also the mentor, these students who are in the program that are in, they could be mentors for the students in the elementary programs and the junior high programs, to bring back and have those conversations. Not necessarily do they have to go to the museum, because that's a cost. Maybe they do that initially, but to have those ongoing conversations. Maybe it's a community service opportunity for those students to say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to work at these particular elementary schools, or this is going to be my idea. I'm hoping that we can be creative in how how we might do it, that not necessarily does it have to cost money, but it could be a way of integrating it so that everybody has an opportunity, like you said, to even know it exists and even know that they could have that opportunity. That's what excites me.
I think that the one other thing that I would say is, in working with the, I mean, we obviously went through this, we developed the Engineering Academy with that grant. It's our hope that through developing the media program, working with that team of people, working the computer science, that more opportunities for the same type of learning will exist at Dos Pueblos as well. I mean, right now it's 400 students, and that's a big program for what we try to do. And if we can expand that with media and computer science, we envision about 1,000 students being able to have access to the type of these similar types of learning experiences, just not necessarily in the engineering domain. Ultimately, we think that it's going to be a broader course offering, and the inter-programmatic collaboration is going to be very special.
Thank you.
If I could just make one comment, because the conversation tilted toward the elementary space. Let me just say that we've had similar discussions, very philosophically and aligned, I think, in terms of where we would like to see the elementary space head. Just to make a comment on the discussion around minutes. Minutes are a constraint, but it's one that puts us in a position to really think much more deeply about authenticity, about opportunities to put students at the center of learning and give them opportunities for greater agency. And that is one of the things that I think where these opportunities really connect us. Students don't view the world compartmentalized the way sometimes we deliver it in schools. That's simply not the way that they experience life, particularly the youngest ones. They're creative, they see patterns, they see numbers, they see all of these different ideas all wrapped up in one. And somehow, over the years, things are different because of the way in which we present learning and present it in very sometimes segmented ways. We are, and we wouldn't know necessarily have the time to go into it now, but we are pushing through that. And my mention around any of these constraints, it's just about intentionality and making sure that we are increasingly providing students with robust opportunities. Exposure is one component of that, but it's also how do we shape learning conditions to maximize engagement, opportunity, and student interest as they progress, so that they can envision themselves heading into programs that they decide as they get older and older and their interests become much more polished and articulated, that they have avenues to do so. But if you don't know about them, absolutely right, that can't enter into the consciousness. The work that has emerged in the Adams Makerspace, the work that has emerged in Franklin is an inroad to that, but it's not an end unto itself. To reframe how students learn in our elementaries is our ultimate goal. And in order to do so, we just need to make very intentional choices with our time, with our resources, and really think, how do we prioritize? So that's I think to connect two different conversations that ultimately are reflected in where students end up in our system, right? And that is one expression of that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's really great to have all of you coming together and having these conversations now, and I guess that's all I'm sort of bringing it out. Just to have those conversations is exciting to know that they're happening and they're relational to elementary all the way up, that in our district community, how we are going to envision this amazing opportunity throughout and thread throughout our district. So thank you. Any other comments? I think Ms. Parker?
I'm going to wait to the end of the presentation.
Does anyone else have a comment, though? I think you are.
They're not done.
Oh, you're not?
Yeah, we're not done.
Oh.
We're about
There you go.
2/3 done with our presentation. All right, I'm going to ask Joe Wilcox and Matt Grades to come to the podium, and if I could ask Brian Rouse, can you pull up a Google satellite image of that part of Dos Pueblos High School before we look at the schematics? Because I just want to help the board get oriented where on campus this is. minute. All right, that's probably, you can go one more zoom in on that south portion and see if it doesn't go fuzzy on us. All right. So there is the DPEA building with the dot on it. And so that building stays put. And you can see a parking lot right adjacent to that. And then you see a variety of buildings with blue roofs and sort of red roofs. So those are the portables. All right, so that's the Q wing. So the vision is to take out all of those old buildings to move the parking lot closer to Alameda and then insert the new building in between current DPA building and a shifted parking lot. So now we are mindful that there are some houses right there. All right, so we call that Cafeteria Road, is that right, Ms. Carey? So Cafeteria Road, I guess that's the delivery trucks take food to the cafeteria. This is going to be a 2-story building, and we've just had a lot of design iterations around how do we build the vision without creating a really tall building next to houses right there. Okay, so that's context. Oh, now Google finally caught up with the resolution. So let's go back now to the schematics, and I would invite our architects. Why don't we go through floor plan of the Media Arts building first, and then the engineering building, and engineering manufacturing second, and then the second floor is, we're going to have to kind of describe the vision of that.
So good evening, and thank you for having us. This has been, as Carrie said, this has been quite the design charrette. It started off with Carrie calling me and Amir calling me and Matt and I and saying, what would it take to put a 8,000 to 10,000 square foot building on the west side of the existing engineering academy and move the site plan? And we got involved with helping get the state funding. Matt and I worked side by side, kind of going through that process through Thanksgiving and so on. And then the call was, well, what if we take it to 14,000 square feet? Can you guys continue to come up with some ideas? And how about 24,000 square feet? So it's kind of like being back at Cal Poly. It was like learn by doing. We just jumped in and did it. I know we all use the internet extensively, but in our office, Matt and I use SneakerNet. I get up and walk over to his desk, which is about 8 paces. And I was going to talk about the site plan, but Carrie, you took that from me, so Matt's going to talk about the floor plan.
So on the, just kind of to give you some context here, the campus, this is oriented north just like Google was. So the engineering academy right now, engineering academy building is right on this side. The street is further that way. Our neighbors are down here to the south. Sorry, I wasn't speaking to the mic here. But on the left-hand side is this sort of media arts, computer science portion. On the right-hand side is this museum space part. So just to kind of give you some orientation, in the middle we have sort of a street. One of the key things that we're trying to do is be, as you'll probably see, it's a highly efficient layout, meaning that we don't have a lot of hallway space. We don't have a lot of excessive circulation space. Part of that is, I think, this idea of, one of the things I really appreciated about Amir's comment was this idea of authenticity. And I think one of the things that's sort of happening here is we're creating a lot of porous components. So we have these visually porous elements between the classrooms. If you look at that sort of center space, we have kind of a pinwheel hub, and those spaces have visual connection as well as actual physical connection. So there's sliding doors that allow you to go in between all the spaces. Again, highly collaborative, and allowing the students to sort of interact with each other in kind of this cross-discipline format. So there's that component on that side. We do have on the south end, we have the AV portion, and we've talked a lot about how to use that more efficiently. And I think that's another aspect of this project that's kind of exciting, is that it's a highly efficient use of the space, and not just the layout of the space, but we've been talking a lot about trying to distill this down to these core elements that make it as compelling as possible.
On the right-hand side, you'll see the first floor. It's kind of broken out. Amir can probably talk more about how it's broken out, but this idea of these different zones. And there's the sort of showcase element, which is the finished projects on the north. You have these kind of beta testing components, meaning that the projects are still in production. And then you have the sort of projects that are actually being built out on the assembly side, which is on the south end of the larger museum space. And the lower end, there's some classroom space, kind of what Amir was talking about, these professional development spaces, or this integration with elementary school students. So that's kind of that floor. The next floor is probably, and this is fairly traditional, this is probably the pretty exciting part of the project. We have a mezzanine space, meaning that this is kind of that integration component where the cross-discipline with the media arts section, where we have display space. So basically all that orange is floor area, and then it's open to below. So you actually, as you enter the museum, you'd be looking up into a mezzanine space. Our thing that we've been using as sort of a model for us to visualize this has been the Maritime Museum. If you've ever been inside the Maritime Museum, you come in one floor and you can see what's happening on the floor above. That's kind of, this is like a bigger version of that. So you have exhibit space, basically that whole area is exhibit space. And it's both for the projects, these authentic projects that the Engineering Academy is creating, but also these sort of opportunities for the media arts to display their stuff in this same spot. As you go out and cross over that streetway that we created in between the buildings, you'll see that there's these bridges. Those bridges lead you to the rooftop of the media arts building, which is sort of an outdoor display area for these projects. And then there's an office component, some other things that are kind of connected to the project innovation and development portion. So that's kind of the rough layout. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, so we can answer those, but I just want to kind of orient you on that part of the project. Yeah, so I'll let Joe talk about the site.
So Carrie pretty much described the site on the Google map. I think we have a graphic of that. So this kind of shows where the Engineering Academy building is now. And by the way, that was a fantastic project to work on with Amir. And it's a privilege to work with him again. I'm always impressed. His portion, the CTE portion, is the one right to the west of his building. The Paseo Street we're going to develop, and then the media arts, and then the new parking lot. So, and it's been great work with John Dent as well, and a lot of fun. Any questions?
Ms. Parker.
It's now the time where I should ask my overall questions. I just want to say on the architect piece that, you know, we give you guys some pretty interesting projects, don't we? We really do.
We really do. And we appreciate
I hope
it.
you appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at that and going, wow, I mean, I mean, obviously you work with a huge range of clients, but a museum on a school site, wow. On a K-12 site, that's pretty unusual. Might be unique.
Might be unique.
Yeah, so I think that the location makes tons of sense, and that this is really exciting, and I hope that we're able to move forward with it in a timely way, and that this is successful. And I'm ready to ask my questions that are not architecture related, or bring up my points. One of the, I was just looking at the MOU from 2009 and thinking about, just prior to 2009, we developed AR 7215 in our facilities policies. And that happened because we had a situation where a school had said that they would fundraise for something, the district went ahead and built it, and they actually didn't have the money, they weren't able to fundraise it. That was not Dos Pueblos. But because of that, we put in an AR around fundraising for schools, and we've always encouraged outside fundraising for school projects, and we have always, the board has always supported schools' unique visions for what they feel will serve their programs. Really specifically, when it looks like we're going to see this as an action item for the MOU at our first meeting in August. And I think it would be great because the old MOU, even though that AR existed, it didn't spell out that we will not go out to bid until 75% of the funding is raised. I think it would be good if that's actually in the MOU and spelled out there and not just in the AR. The AR has not been updated since 2008, so Mr. Vizzolini, you might want to take a look at it to see if it needs revising before any augmented facilities projects come to us, because it hasn't been looked at in any detail in so long. So I think that this is a terrific project and I'm super excited about it. We did just have a huge conversation, as you know, about equity among our schools. And so maybe this is a Ms. Carey question. And two issues. One is around facilities, because we've always, like, if a school site comes forward and say, we have this exciting idea and we're going to help fundraise for it, for this academy, for this stadium, we have supported that. Sometimes it has meant that there are some pretty dramatic differences around facilities around schools. And a big, obvious one has been the pool, for example, at Dos Pueblos, which has caused issues with us at our other high schools over the time. And so the board always has to be thinking about it in that context. And I know that we end up, and in fact, I feel like Dos Pueblos ends up doing more fundraising, like the district will support programs with district funding in a way that Dos Pueblos ends up just being able to go out and get money for it. But we do take a look at that, and we do have great projects at all of the high school sites, but sometimes it can feel different to parents, and it can feel different to academies. And so I just want to be mindful about as we move forward with this, and Ms. Carey in particular, not tonight, but I would love feedback around this. Is this going to raise, because this is actually not just facilities, you're talking programming as well. And I think that could raise issues with some of our other academies. This I see as a role model. I've always seen the DPEA as a role model, and something that we should be aspiring to. And it's like, wow, this is how you do it. Let's do it this way. And yet, so many times that doesn't happen. But I want to be careful, and I don't want other academies or parent groups of the other schools to feel like, wow, this has happened again. And so I just would love you, Ms. Carey, to be talking to the principals at all three of the comprehensives, and to talk about what kind of impact this might, what kind of issues this might raise with their academies in particular, and their parent groups in general. Because I'm going to support this. I'm going to totally support this, and I want this to be a role model for others. But I also want them to see it as an opportunity, like, oh, if this is something that we can build and we want this at one school, then how can our student communities, our parent communities in our district support it, so that maybe with different models, that's at different schools as well. And so those are the points that I wanted to make tonight.
Ms. Sims-Mountain.
Yes. I just first have a question. Ms. Parker, what is AR?
Administrative regulation.
Administrative regulations. Another one I need to learn. Okay, so I'm excited about this because I obviously wasn't a part of this when the original Engineering Academy heard about it, but didn't really have the opportunity to experience. So I'm really excited to be a part on the ground going, and thank you for all the work that you're putting in there. The comment that I have, it looks like a whole nother city. And so how do you, the question I would have as it being that large, how do you incorporate the whole school owning that piece as opposed to just the folks that that it seems to be that they're going to be participating in it? So I would have that question of separation, appearance of separation, and how do you own the whole, how does the whole school own this? So anyway, I don't know.
You know what, I'll respond to that just to keep it moving. We talk about this probably every design meeting because we don't want this space to feel exclusive, and I know the vision for the space is to not have it be separate. And so we use the word porosity. We got to come up with a better word. Permeable, connected. We want every program, every student to flow through this space. I mean, it is such a large space that it will be a gathering space for the whole high school. So we're very mindful of not creating the perception that this is a bigger version of the engineering academy. I think having 3 academies in this whole space is important, but it's that mezzanine space, it's going to be a display case for art, for all kinds of student work. So.
Thank you, Ms. And I'd also add, maybe that's in the messaging. I know we're saying that here, but it's important in terms of that inclusivity be in the messaging as we're doing this in all the academies and all the things that we're doing, so that people understand that they're a part of it from the beginning as well.
Bill Woodard has been working on a communication piece to the entire staff and to all parents, and so we are going to capture that sentiment.
All right, any other comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Well, we're actually not done.
Oh. Lord.
I know, well, it's a big project. So the MOU from 2009, we're going to take that as the base for a new MOU. It needs to be updated. I appreciate the reminders about syncing it with perhaps even a new version of the AR. And so the goal is to bring you a draft of that at the next board meeting. I almost feel like I need to have Craig Price parked in my office, like, a day a week, so Craig's got some homework to do. And I do want to respond to the concern about building before we have the money. And so I've been very clear with this team, and they're very supportive of it, that the money needs to be fully in the bank before we issue a contract for a phase. And I actually asked Craig Price about our ability to use the lease-back delivery model with more flexibility, and he said absolutely. So we could take this project and carve it into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then we issue the notice to proceed to the contractor for phase 1 only. And that's all we're contractually obligated to. Now, once this thing starts rising out of the ground, we need to finish it. But I do not want the district fronting the money when the project is $18 million. And this team is very committed on the fundraising side. Like, we're going to bring an update by October 1st. That's how organized Sandy is on the fundraising side. So I anticipate that they're going to produce evidence of commitments, of pledges. And we've even talked about, an initial deposit as we issue even the architect contract, because that's a big contract. And so they respect that they need to have some skin in the game when that goes out. So just know that we are very committed to not committing the district to anything unless 100% of the funding is in for that phase of the contract. Okay? Even the 75% number, that when you have these kinds of dollars, that's just too much risk for us. And I think there's one more slide. Oh, I have a clicker. Nope, I just kicked it. So the last slide is key milestones. So we're way up. So tonight you're hearing this idea. We are going to bring a draft of the MOU between DePeef, that's how I've learned to pronounce it, and the district. And then so you'll get a first reading of the MOU, and then we want that MOU approved by both the DePeef board and our school board, because that's the environment in which the capital campaign is going to operate under. They need to understand our commitments and agreements as well as theirs. And so that's really important that we get that approved early. And then we're going to bring approval of a full design contract with KBZ on September 11th. Now, the 10% of the full project will be $1.72 million. Roughly, that's going to be the fee. Just know that we can press pause at any time. So if the money's not showing up, we can just tell KBZ, please stop. So know that when we commit to a contract, there's all these timelines and parameters. So we need to identify a builder. And the fact that we have lease back as a tool is really helpful, because boy, you want to get this price identified as soon as possible. And it's gonna be, I think the construction timeline is 18 to 20 months. So, you know, we need to get this thing moving because inflation is happening every year. We should be done with conceptual design by October. Plan is to send it to DSA in April. And then groundbreaking, catch this, in winter of 2020. Let your brain just sort of sit with that one. I'm just looking for reactions, like 2020. Occupancy, August 2021. So it's doable. It is totally doable. Got a great team. The community support is tremendous. And I've gotten to know the DPEAF group and been to Sandy's house multiple times. And, you know, it's just, this is going to happen. Yeah. So there you go. Amir's just going. He gets worried. Nah, I'll just get worried. Yeah.
We're like go big or go home, but we're also put up or shut up. We're putting up too early, but that's all right. Just it's a new way of being for me.
So this will be a pretty standing agenda item. You're going to see lots of reports, lots of approval points, and the number of approvals that the board will be asked to take action on is many in the next 6 months. So look forward to the progress.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving forward. Court discussion agenda item, discussion of new course approvals, Ms. Carey.
You skipped the budget analysis.
I'm going back to number 1 and we're going to end with the budget.
End the budget. Okay, Ms. Carey.
Good evening again, board. These are, as promised, more course approvals. These two are fairly straightforward. They're not representing some sort of new groundbreaking territory into which we are, you know, journeying. The first one really is, well, the first one is outdoor team sports is listed here. The rationale for this, PE is obviously not a new course, but something that people may not realize is that at certain school sites, staff have taken upon themselves to develop a concentration within PE in order to maximize student interest and engagement. So when a student selects a PE course, they might choose PE with a concentration in martial arts, or swimming, or badminton, or dance. In this case, this is adding another kind of PE concentration with an emphasis on outdoor team sports. We can't always accommodate students' requests there because they often end up as singletons in the master schedule, but we elicit from students, okay, what would be your first, second, or third sort of variety or brand of PE? All of these PE courses deliver the standards for physical education, but they do it through an emphasis on this area of more interest for a student, which is just helpful in that for students, the students who are traditionally enrolled in PE, you know, most athletes are participating in formal athletic programs, and so anything we can do to promote engagement and interest in PE is something that I really try to support. So this is kind of just a new brand of that. That's one that's coming before you that will, you know, pending your questions and my response to them, would come before you at the next meeting on consent. The second one really is a course that's already offered. This is, I think, bringing into alignment just our workflow and how we put things in the course catalog and making sure that things always do meet with board approval before we're, you know, using all the formal structures that we have to include them in course catalog and in course selection processes. This affects a very small number of students at the one school where there is the International Baccalaureate program. Students who pursue the IB diploma, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of students who take IB courses, but only a couple dozen and within a grade level cohort who pursue the full IB diploma. Within that pursuit, there must be 3 courses taken at standard level, meaning 1 year, and 3 courses taken at higher level. So students can kind of mix and match what those are, and as many higher level offerings as we have and can support just means more student choice. So this is year 2 of the Latin course within the IB program. This is a course that is co-seated with AP Latin and sometimes even with first year IB Latin. So these, again, is a relatively small number of students, but for transcripting purposes, for propriety, for making sure we're coding and tracking students with precision, we're formalizing this as a new course approval so that we can, as I said, bring it into that kind of alignment. Questions or comments?
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
Just when I was reading the description for the outdoor team sports, it said a quarter, but isn't DP semester?
Right, so all PE courses are set up like quarter courses. Am I speaking correctly, Mr. Rouse? So that's just standard fare for PE. PE credit is transcripted quarterly.
And so they would just go into regular PE after the semester, or the quarter was done,
Or for the year, so for the whole year. You typically, course selection in high schools is done on a semester basis. I mean, most courses are year long. A few courses are semester long. When students sign up for this, I'm not sure if on the course request form or in Aries electronically, whether it's presented as, do you want PE in the fall to be outdoor team sports and PE in the spring to be basketball, or if it actually comes in quarterly increments. Do you know that, Mr. Rouse? On the course request process in Aries?
It's complicated.
Do you want to speak to it?
Generally speaking, students are selecting they would select outdoor team sports and would end up being placed in that for the full year. And they work with their counselor if that was going to be switching at the semester. We're actually in the process, though, of designing some new protocols to clean that up further.
That's a good answer. A typical example, though, sometimes students go in or out of a sport and into a PE class, which could be their off-season sport or it could be this. So that might be worked out on a case-by-case basis at the semester change.
All right, I don't think we have any more questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving to a multi-year analysis of our budgets, 2016 through 2018, Mr. Matsuoka.
I started analyzing our multi-year budgets really as part of my review of my work for last year as I prepare my report of my work for the board's evaluation. And I was just more than curious. I thought that's a big part of the job of a superintendent. And now that we have enough data, I wanted to just collate this. And so what this is, it's a synthesis of like snapshots. And each multi-year projection, you've seen a format in first interim, second interim, adopted budget. And I've worked with probably 6 CBOs in my career. And at first, none of them Meg calls it Carrie's multi-year projection. But that's fine, because it is my format. But I'm very intentional about this format, because it is a picture of our status. Now, when you show a movie, it tells a story. I've said that to you over and over. Now we have enough pictures that I can create a narrative. And it's late, you've read it, but there's some really good news here. And the good news is, I go straight to total reserves. That's really, if you want to go, what's the bottom line is what is our reserves as we go through each year. And so the first year that's on the left, the adopted budget, I had to grab it out of the budget booklet because I wasn't here yet. So I didn't have that multi-year projection format. So pretty sure that's accurate to the template. And you can see total reserves for the district started at 4.69% total. Only Ms. Parker was on the board that evening. I was present the day the budget was adopted on June, it would have been 14th. The budget passed 4-1. And since it's public record, Mr. Herron voted no. And I'm sitting out there as the new superintendent to be, I'm going, whoa, I've never seen a board member vote no on the annual budget. So once I got on the ground, I just had a lot of questions. And as you can see the trend, what happened, information changed a lot that year. But the bottom line is if you look at the total reserves, 4.7%, we ended at 17%. And we gave a 2% retroactive raise that year. just reminding context, okay? So, I mean, that's a healthy trend. I think the other thing that changed dramatically, look at the total revenue that year. It was projected at 144.8 million. The revenue climbed to 156 million. A lot of one-time money was flowing into public school districts. That was Jerry Brown's style. You know, it's hard. Oh, we have a lot of money in the state. And so he would give it as one-time money. Now, we, in the blue, that's last year. Question?
Can I just ask Mr. Matsuoka, on the labeling for the columns in the yellow?
Yeah.
I was struggling a bit with the dates
Yeah.
at the top, because the other ones go in a certain order, and the yellow doesn't match for the blue. So, can you clarify a little bit to
I
me?
can. And Cabinet had the same reaction. It was already in the queue for notice. So the date, January 10th, in the future, I should label that first interim. Because it took me a while to work with Meg to get the format right. That first interim is usually adopted, I think, at the December board meeting. So I finally got a snapshot, so that really should be first interim. And then we didn't have a second interim that year, multi-year projection, but June 13th was the adopted budget for the next year, but now we start getting estimated actuals. So what I will note is 110 should be first interim. I don't have a second interim, but June 13th will be adopted budget for the next year. But you'll notice in our multi-year projections, as we plan for next year, you see data starting to form up about unaudited actuals, estimated closing. And so there's a bit of a time shift that you have to sort of stick with. And then when you get to October 12th, that's first interim of the blue year, but it's a look back at how the prior year actually finished out. That is now audited actuals. Okay.
So you're gonna add those numbers?
Yeah, so I'll clean it up. So now in the blue, that should be adopted budget, June 13th, 2017. First interim, October 12th. March 11th, that's second interim. And then June 17th, which was just a month ago, that was adopted budget for the next year, but we're starting to get actual data for last year.
So is there a date error in the first yellow column? Should that be June 28th, 2016 and not 2017?
Oh, that's right, I didn't change this. That's right, we caught this in Cabinet. That should be 6/28/2016 with the asterisk. Yeah, that was the other, sorry. I'm messing up my readers. Now, on the blue, there is one more snapshot yet to come. It will be when we get the first interim report for the next fiscal year, but then we will have completed the actuals, everything's done, and we have audited actuals. And I can predict, just based on patterns, the beginning fund balance, look at how it climbs. So it's 18, 24, 24. I think our beginning fund balance will climb next year because we don't spend all our money every year. It's probably going to go up not as much as it did in past years, maybe by 2 million. Again, the most important thing, look at total reserves for this year. It started at 8.8 and we finished it at 15.4. And remember the board policy goal of getting 10% in our strategic reserve, our Fund 17. We're making progress. And you can see the jump in the Fund 17. We shared this very quickly. We added another 2 million to Fund 17 right at the end of the year because this basic age shift, Cesar Chavez, the RDA money that came in, we just had some one-time money. Let's save it. As we look at next year, that's the beginning, and that records the 2% raise that's been granted for next year. I share this as a big picture. I think we as the governance superintendent team, we bear a lot of responsibility for monitoring health. And as I said in the narrative, I'm looking for inflection points. I'm looking for when something starts to change. Like next time I'm probably going to graph some of this, and you're going to see this you know, kind of increment up, and then it's gonna go down, and then it's gonna go up, and these are good trends. I've been waiting for the next recession as a superintendent for the last 5 years. But it's great that it hasn't arrived. Someday we've got to be prepared for a recession. It's been the longest run that I can remember. I mean, I've been a superintendent, this is year 13. I've dealt with 2 recessions. The fact that we haven't had another one is amazing. So it's good, but we should be ready. So comments or questions?
Ms. Parker?
I'll comment that you're jinxing us right now and
I don't have that much influence.
Thank you. I really appreciate this view, and I think it's very, very helpful. And I think, I don't know, in some ways, we used to have it that the budget section of our website was much more robust, so that members of the public could easily find documents like this, and that we could easily find documents like this instead of trying to search through the completely non-functioning search of Nova's agenda, but that's a different topic. And so I really think that this is good for the public, and it would be good for us to consider adding back into the budget section of our website information like this that it's pretty easy to see and understand, especially if you add the labels. So that's great. And I also want to share that Mr. Heron is paying just as close attention as he ever did. And I get, and you know, it's super helpful. And he would certainly be glad to see those reserve numbers, especially funding the special reserve. I mean, that was a huge push for him to get that into our board policies and ARs. And he would be very pleased, I know, we're all pleased to see it going there, although I would also say that, of course, we would never want it to do so at the expense of services to students. And so that's something that we always have to keep an eye on.
And I would just add with your graphing comment that we can do some pie charts, because those are really easy to read, and you can really, at least for the public's sake, it's a pie chart. It's easy to say what you're beginning, what you're spending it on, and what your revenue. So as you're thinking about that.
Yeah, we have pie charts on annual expenditures in the annual budget report. I think what would be helpful is to put some line graphs about the trends.
All right, well, thank you. And I guess we are now moving on to coming events. All right. Well, we know potentially very soon there's going to be more back-to-school nights. Okay, so we're that to look forward to. Moving now to agenda item K, future agenda items. I wanted to tell the board that I shared with Mr. Matsuoka the future agenda items, printed them out next, and we talked about it, and he talked about wanting to incorporate these in the future of our next meetings. Specifically, I mentioned 2 issues, language justice, and also Laura's suggestion in terms of really looking at, like, for example, how are we interacting and engaging in a community with relationship to, for example, our Franklin Center and LaCumbra Center, and just more knowledge about what we are providing to the community, which is exciting, and to bring that awareness to not only the board, but to the community as well. Anybody else? All right, so our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 14th, and it will be a regular board meeting. And if I have the approval of my fellow board members, I will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you.